Novum Carta. Dedicated to my son and daughter. May you find happiness and meaning in the coming age. May you be creators and find the way as I have. Novum Carta. Copyright 2020 by Ryan Miller. Initial published date December 12, 2020. Printed and bound in the United States of America. All rights reserved. No parts of this book may be reproduced in any form or by any electronic or mechanical means, including information storage and retrieval systems, without permission from the publisher, except by a reviewer, who may quote brief passages in a review, or by expressed consent. Images in this book were created by Ryan Miller. Any likeness or bearing resemblance to any other image in the known world is a coincidence. Synchronicity is real. This is an audio-only version of the book, and this audio version will also be made freely available for promotional purposes. As a listener, you will be missing several graphics that are used to emphasize points, or that help support the narrative of a topic. I found them highly beneficial. The translation of this audiobook is done through artificial intelligence. During the conversion is lumped words together, made up words, or jumbled titled headings into the start of the paragraph. The output is not great, nor is it awful either. It is a 90% approximation to the real book. If you enjoyed this book, please consider making a donation on our website at www.novumcarta.com. Or you can purchase the book from our website, LuLu, or Amazon. The ebook is $3.99. Paperback is $10.99. And the hardback is $17.99. If you have any questions, you can reach out to me at admin@novumcarta.com. I hope you enjoy. Introduction. Welcome to the ideology and worldview of Novum Carta. Very simply, we are a group of like-minded people who seek knowledge and camaraderie in uncertain times. The knowledge we seek we pass on to one another, and in times of global catastrophe, we will help the world rebuild through this knowledge transfer. The word novum has many connotations that can mean political innovations, novel, revolution, or new. Carta, on the other hand, means charter or record. Novum Carta means new charter. Contained within these pages is a new charter of philosophical and ideological beliefs, borrowing from the old to create the new. This framework of beliefs attempts to help throw off the modern notions of nihilism, consumer culture, and cast life in a new light. People who ascribe to these beliefs are called Novumists and adhere to the Novum Carta. The Novum Carta borrows from many ideologies and philosophies such as Buddhism, Gnosticism, Hermeticism, conservatism, centrism, liberalism, survivalism, cultural nationalism, paganism. These beliefs, like any ideology, fall within different categories. Within this book, we cover the core topics of religion, philosophy, political, and cultural. These concepts overlap, and many of which are to a great degree much like any belief structure. Let's go into a brief introduction of these topics now. Religion introduction. Novumists religiously believe in a few points that may seem familiar from other religious texts: the doctrine, the way, deity, simple living, and preparedness. The doctrine consists of the source, the mother, the one, and the teacher. These concepts originate from Gnosticism but are given new names and purposes in the Novum Carta. The way consists of following the middle way in the 2 states, 3 truths, and 6 paths. The way is similar to that of the Taoist Tao, and is a way of achieving the flow of being through the least resistance. It is the way of finding the middle of 2 extremes. It is the way of honing self-virtue. It is the way of putting the future over profits. It is the way of taking only from society what you need. Novumists are pagan, adhering to the discipleship of gods and goddesses, for which there are 12. These are a recompilation of the gods of old brought into new times, with new names and new focuses. Novumists choose discipleship when they join and learn about their God. As life changes, a Novumist's God may change. We follow the middle way in all aspects of how we live. Novumists believe in living simply between that of Amish living and that of abundance. It is not uncommon for a Novumist to participate in alternative living styles and be van lifers, RVers, off-gridders, and hermits. We are secure in our lives because we are prepared for the future. Novumists prepare for the events of man and those of the cycles by having a ready supply of goods for survival for themselves and their loved ones. This is where we deviate from the Buddhist thought of living in the now, the present moment. Although we do strive to live in the present, for much of our practice the reality of existence is somewhat at odds with this notion. As such, we ready ourselves for what may come. Philosophy introduction. As a Novumist, philosophy is interwoven with the religious aspects, and these consist of the 2 states of self, 3 truths of living, and 6 paths of self-discipline. With that are also the concepts of limits of complexity, human nature, and an emphasis on historical knowledge of humankind. This later point bleeds into the duty that all take. A central point of the Novum Carta is to walk the paths while maintaining a middle way in all things we do. These concepts of paths and the middle way are found in Buddhism, and we have our own rendition of it. The two states of self are defined as the state of the hero and the state of the antihero. The hero possesses all the noble and productive qualities of a person. The state of the antihero is darker and has the traits of neurosis, fears, insecurities, and anger. A productive person chooses the hero way. We will show you how to walk the correct path. The three truths of living are borrowed from Buddhist beliefs. It advocates that life is suffering, and to end suffering one must walk the paths, the 6 paths of self-discipline. These 6 paths are livelihood, thought, action, speech, effort, and understanding. Much of our study and discipline comes from these paths because these are what give us our virtue. We will explain each and give guidance on how to navigate them in a chapter dedicated to them later. The limits of complexity advocate the need for a simple life. The belief states that nature and the systems created by man have hard limits to how complex they can be. It is our duty then to be wary of these systems and prepare for their failures. Human nature is an objective exploration of the biological and psychological states of humankind. We explore what needs to drive us, compel us, and what history tells of our pasts may influence our futures to some degree or another. We explore the concept of the cycles and humans' past experiences with it. Ultimately, it paints a concept of collective individuality. The last part of the philosophy called the duty. Simply put, the duty is where we as members seek knowledge for knowledge's sake. We study the sciences, history, and partake in learning skills. We do this so that if and when a cataclysmic shift to our world occurs, we can transfer these skills and the knowledge we've gleaned which will be needed for the necessities of civil society. Politics Introduction. Novumists consider themselves as politically neutral, contrarians, and simply a stopgap between the right and the left. The best prevention of radicalism on either side is a strong center, in fact possibly even a slightly radical center. In terms of preferred political structure, we prefer that of a skillsocracy. This is by no means necessary for a Novumist to hold these beliefs, but these are our stated positions. We will go over this concept in detail. Culture Introduction. Culture is a large part of a Novumist's life. A Novumist adheres to a cultural element that permeates society. The religious element of the Novum Carta is further refined by espousing the concept of shared experiences. These experiences bind cohesive groups of people, independent of race or economic background, to central lived experience. Humans need shared experiences to feel a part of a group, whether that be small tribal bands or those as large as a nation. It is the aim of the Novum Carta for each member to contribute so that each member can live these shared experiences. It is these experiences that bind us like no other philosophical religious ideology. We will describe this in further detail and give examples of experiences for which to follow. Now that you have a general idea as to what a Novumist is, and what we believe, let us begin with a little more detail. This is the Novum Carta. Section: Religion. This section will primarily deal with the cosmology of the Novum Carta and the metaphysics thereof. The topics covered here will be the backdrop and will build on many concepts going forward, in particular the Hermetic principles, the way, the duty, and the cyclical nature of our cosmos and reality. The mythos. The mythology of the Novum Carta is expansive and exists as an egg within an egg within an egg. Within each egg exists a new reality to uncover. We humans exist within the most inner sphere, and as we work our way out, it becomes more expansive with beings of unimaginable and indescribable power. Our mythos begin at creation. The Mother and the One. The Mother is an honorific given to the Mother of the One. The Mother, being the lowest on the hierarchy of goddesses and gods that exist outside the source, wanted a child. She without permission and without consort chose to conceive regardless. She willed the One into being within her womb and birthed him. After she gave birth to the One, the other great goddesses and gods, seeing that he was not like them, banished the One from their kingdom. The great nameless gods and goddesses from their combined will created the source and confined the One within it. The Mother's last duty was to bestow the source with the ability to provide life and experience to the One so that he may know happiness in eternity. Existing alone in the darkness of nothingness, confined within the source, the One created the universe for which we exist. The great egg. He then created the lesser gods and goddesses, our world, many other worlds, and the mechanisms for life to form. These gods and goddesses were created to watch over the many sentient forms of life that were created. He has no name but only the honorific the One, the creator of man, woman, and everything. The One is not the same as demiurge in Gnostic religious hierarchy, nor is the One Abraxas. The duality that exists within nature and us exists within him as well. He encompasses the full duality of existence in both being good and evil, existing as order and chaos, of knowing everything and nothing, being everywhere but being in one place, and of existing and not. The Source. The Source permeates all existence inside this universe and beyond. It is the fabric that creates the particles of our being and from which the cycles of human experience come about from. It is the ether from which our will be done, from which fate resides, destiny originates, and the source that emanates the Hermetic principles. The source is the divine and the spiritual, and the framework for magic to work its ways. It is the home of spiritual entities and deities that exist around us, through us, and it is the place we return to when we shed our mortal bodies. It is the source of consciousness for which we all share. The source gives time to reality, consciousness, and is a mechanism for all existence to be. Consciousness is a mechanism for streaming self-aware sentient life experience back to the source. The source is a perpetual experience machine that was created by the Mother for the One. He in return used its abilities to create the universe on top of the source. The purpose of the source is to know everything about everything and to give experiences to those that have consciousness. We are the experiencers that feed the source. When we die, we return to the source which determines our fate. If we lead a good life filled with unique life experiences, the chances will be that we are reborn again, but this is not always the case. If we are chosen, our consciousness is transposed into a new body at an early age, and we live a new life. However, not all consciousnesses are old, some are new, and the source is the controlling mechanism for this. You, me, and all the humans in between share a common home. Just as our bodies exist from dead stars, so too our consciousness is born from the source. We are not guaranteed an afterlife, and as such, it is imperative that we live the best lives here in the material world. The teacher. The teacher is one of the highest forms of human nature. This highest form of being is one who teaches the way. The way can be condensed as thoughts and ideas and ways to live one's life in a productive, honorable, and natural manner. It can come in many forms. The way has existed throughout the age of man, changing slightly through the years, but the message remains ultimately the same. The way is taught by the teacher, an honorific. There have been many teachers that have existed in the cycles of man. Every few hundred years a new teacher is born and gives us lessons to live by. These lessons come from a source of the divine, or of the mind. As religion faded from humanity, it gave rise to philosophy. The teacher can also be a philosopher so long as their message and their life were exemplary, and taught lessons directly or indirectly of the way. The last religious teachers that were born were Jesus and Muhammad, but many have existed before, including Buddha and Confucius. The last philosophical teacher was Carl Jung, but many have existed before, including Descartes and Plato. Each one of these teachers taught human beings how to live a meaningful existence, or spiritually fulfilled life. They taught us how to be good people, live moderately, and how to die well. Below that of the teacher are those who learn the way and spread the word. These are the messengers. There is no teacher in the Novum Carta, but there are messengers who are normal people who walk the paths and spread the word about the way. The role of those who follow the Novum Carta are detailed later in this book under the duty. Consciousness and the source. You are an aperture through which the universe is looking at and exploring itself. Alan Watts. Consciousness is the hardware that gives rise to all things material. You, me, your cat, that tree, the atoms that make the universe, exist because consciousness makes it so. Consciousness is the membrane of reality that instructs the quantum strings to arrange to form the letters on this paper. All things created from consciousness are imbued with instructions that tell them how to be. From these letters to the thoughts in your head, all exist of consciousness. We, however, being sentient, are capable of willing our own actions and altering the very fabric of reality, within reason. At the moment of conception, our conscious entity is birthed from the source. There is a concept in programming called instantiation, which means you make copies from a base object. In game programming or during gameplay, these objects would be enemies or NPCs, for example. These enemies have minor alterations in attributes such as speed, aggression levels, strength, dexterity, and others. When the player defeats the enemy, in a short period of time, the enemy is instantiated and recreated in the world with no memory of its prior existence. Similarly, this happens to us. Our entity is primed with unique traits, our core programming. When we inhabit our unique meat body with its own strengths and limitations, we become conscious entities in part due to our brain. As all things are imbued with consciousness, man and women are seemingly the only ones with the brain structure that we know of definitively, which allows us to know our fate and make use of the time we have. You, me, and the other billions of people are instances of human consciousnesses originating from the same source, the source. We are all clones despite our many differences. When we attack one person, we attack ourselves. When we praise and lift another, we do the same to ourselves. When one dies, we are less whole. Our instantiated existence ceases the material plane when we die. When this happens, we return to the source where we are processed and reinstantiated back into the material world. This is similar to reincarnation, and every once in a while, a bug appears in the system, such as remembering past lives. Our purpose is as determinate as our unique programming allows. Our meaning in life is to find knowledge and understanding. The reason why we are here experiencing this life is to bring knowledge and experience itself back to the source. All return back to the source, those of good, evil, and all between. Being good makes life better for all humanity as a whole, but it is not a requirement. Some brains are born bad or through life circumstances create bad people. Our duty to ourselves and people is to make less losers, within reason, for even altruism can make people evil. We must accept biological realities that some people have the genetic disposition for doing bad things while at the same time understanding the nuance that some of those people have the willpower to change their destiny. As everyone dies, we all return. There are no gods that stamp out evil, for if there ever were, our world would be a better place already. Man and woman control the fate of the material, the source is just the mechanism to gather experience thereof. All complex life is tethered to the source, whether self-conscious or not. We are tethered to the source every moment of the day or night. When this life departs the physical world, the essence of being is consumed, catalogued, and reinstantiated. Hermetic principles. These words of wisdom, although written by my decaying hand, shall remain imperishable through time. May they be imbued with the medicine of immortality. Hermes Trismegistus. Novumists follow the 7 Hermetic principles. These principles were compiled in the early 1900s and are said to originate from Hermes Trismegistus, a sage and a god, who may have once been a man. In Greece, he was called Hermes, while in Egypt he was called Thoth. Even though the compilation of these principles may originate recently, the foundation they stand on comes from the ancient past and were carried forward since then by initiate to initiate. Isaac Newton himself studied the Hermetic texts from which these principles have origin. These principles are individual windows into how our reality operates. Many of these principles overlap but are also distinct in their own right. Let's begin. All is mind. Everything that happens comes about from a state of mind. Our emotions come from these states, which influence how we perceive the world. Our minds hallucinate our reality from our sensory organs. Our consciousness is what allows us to act and react to the world. Our entire existence may in fact be merely the thought of the One. When we return to the source, our mind is melded with all the minds before us. Because of our emanation from the source, everything that exists within the framework of materialism and the mind are interconnected. We are all one. We all come from the One. As above, so below. Just as a tree's roots mimic the tree's branches, one set in the ground and one outreaching to heaven, so too is reality. As we exist here in our physical reality, we also exist within higher and lower dimensions outside of our visual perspectives. What we manifest from our minds influence reality. Harmony exists when we are in balance. Balance is within the center of duality. Everything is dual, everything has opposites. Black-white. Good-bad. Happy-sad. Alive-dead. Everything has an equal and opposite reaction. Yet, at the same time, these opposites may be subjective from an individual's point of view, hot-cold for example. Our emotions exist on such a spectrum, and it is up to us to hone the degree. Just as the yin-yang symbols blends into one another, so too does everything else. Nothing rests, everything moves, everything vibrates. Although you cannot see it, the atoms in these very words are moving. The quantum strings that make up the nuclei of those atoms exist as vibrations, which give rise to matter. Your emotions are even said to be vibratory. Happiness is energetic, while sadness is depressed. When you change your mind, you change your vibration. Gender is in everything. All things exist as both masculine and feminine. A duality once again. You, me, and the universe could not exist without gender conceiving and birthing the mechanisms for life. Every person within them exists both feminine and masculine. Our role in the greater aspects of society is determined by the sex given to us at birth, and our duty is the joining of that gender with the opposite as to create a coupling of the androgynous. Everything has rhythm. Years turn over from winter, spring, summer, and fall. We are born, we age, and we die. The sun gets warmer, then cooler, then warmer again. One day you are happy, the next you are sad, and the next after you are happy again. Civilization rises and falls and rises again. Everything has rhythm. Everything has a cycle. Every cause has an effect. What began first does not matter, but the continual progression does. As one thing exists, it causes an effect on another thing. Just as two atoms exiting in a vacuum will seek one another out, so do all things. When you throw a rock in the river, the stream diverts slightly. In that diversion, you could have made a place for fish to lay eggs, or when throwing the rock, you could have killed a fish that would have spawned a new species. Every cause has an effect, every effect creates a cause. Discipleships and deity. Novumists choose discipleships that allow them to have a personal relationship with deity. Discipleship is a personal choice, and a Novumist may drift from path to path during different stages in life. Discipleships are spiritually backed by a given deity. These deities and the attributes attributed to them are ancient, existing since recorded history, but exist in the Novum Carta with new names. The following discipleships are available. The sage. The path of wisdom and education. Those who follow this path are interested in knowledge for the sake of learning new and things of old. You will be the disciple of Albert. The teacher. The path of understanding. Those who follow this path seek mindfulness, insight, and magic. You will be the disciple of John. The lover. The path of love and beauty. Those who follow this path, lovers of all people, nature, and animals. You will be the disciple of Bella. The founder. The path of innovation. Those who follow this path are innovators in all aspects of life, including business and entrepreneurship. You will be the disciple of Michael. The leader. The path of leadership. This is the path of leadership, integrity, and strategy in life. You will be the disciple of Daniel. The warrior. The path of strength and strategy. This is the path of heart, honor, and cunning in all things, strength, war, and weapons. You will be the disciple of Luke. The healer. The path of healing. The path of medicine, health, and healing for those seeking good. You will be the disciple of Emma. The huntress. The path of the hunter. Those who follow this path follow the hunter archetype and find comfort in the wilderness and animals. You will be the disciple of Helen. The caregiver. The path of understanding. Follow the firm path of the mother of both strength and love. You will be the disciple of Sophia. The gifted. The path of business and professions. Follow the path of all things trades, business, and art. You will be the disciple of Ida. The reaper. The path of the dead. The path of the eternal where all lives end. You will be the disciple of Seth. The protector. The path of honor. Those who follow this path are devoted to honor, strength, integrity, and strength. You will be the disciple of Leon. Animism. Novumists believe in animism, that objects around us are imbued with a soul. We use the non-Christian quasi-Aristotle version of the word soul to mean the essence of an animal or thing. The essence from rock to plant to animal to human becomes more complex as we progress up the chain and become more self-aware. Essence is the culmination of being, including its memories. These natural objects, animals, and things have personalities. A mountain, for example, may have the characteristics that make it foreboding, your computer, lazy, or your car a beast. We instinctually imbue human traits to these objects either because we are linguistically challenged, or because these things have personalities unique to their nature. A knife will always be a knife. It will never bark at you like a dog, but it can be heavy, sharp, shiny, or have history. Imagine the story Jack the Ripper's knife would tell if it were ever found. Materialists will see a knife, those who see essence will see more. When you start seeing and experiencing these objects, animals, and nature existing with essence, personality, and history, you begin to treat the world differently. This is more than belief. Anyone can believe anything, but experiencing can only be done through physical proximity. To your friends, your cat is just a cat, but your cat is family to you. If you drive a car, your car is an extension of you. As we exist as matter on this planet that was once a star, we are all an extension of one another. All things have an essence, and some things contain spirits. Spirits are like souls that come simple to the complex and dependent on whether it was an object or animal. Spirits are transient souls lingering in the present. A mountain may not have a spirit, but an animal could. A rock may have spirit, but a tree may not. Spirits do not need to be dead to exist. Only the essence of the animal or object needs to be strong enough to manifest to its ethereal demigod-like presence. This essence is determined by the object's history and traits. Identifying what has an essence is often determined by its relationship with those people around it. Entities. The source is the framework for existence, and with that framework exists different layers. Our universe resides in such a layer, a dimension. These dimensions have different vibrational patterns giving rise to different forms of matter and different beings within them. These beings or entities can be revealed to us through a few different methods: deep meditation, lucid dreaming, and psychedelics. The latter may be the substance secreted through both meditation and lucid dreaming. The most direct way is through using dimethyltryptamine, DMT, a very powerful psychedelic. These entities come in different forms: insects, elves/jesters, pixies, snakes, machine creatures, and demons. There are more, but these are the most often encountered. These entities may have played a vital role in the creation of our earliest religions. Just as your consciousness is tethered back to the source, so are these entities tethered as well. Through meditative jhanas, lucid dreaming, and DMT trips, your consciousness travels through the tether back to the source where you can encounter such entities. There is a reason why these encounters are often regarded as more real than real, is because they occur within the source. These entities may be the essence or soul of once living beings. They may also be beings yet to be created and instantiated in our world or others. They may also be beings that are currently living somewhere else in another plane of reality, perhaps at the edge of the universe. These entities have existed around us forever, just out of reach of our senses. Early religions left clues to their existence using the iconography of mushrooms and psychoactive plants and bushes. Even the story of Moses and the burning bush may have been a tale of interacting with entities, because the bush in all likelihood may have been the acacia tree or Peganum harmala, DMT-rich plants that grew in the area at the time. These entities may have their own civilizations, may be gods, the souls of the dead, the essence of things, or even manifestations of man. Those manifestations may be what some call an egregore. An egregore manifests in the minds of people or physically from the collective will or thoughts of groups of people. When enough people believe in something, it is created. Examples include Santa Claus or the Easter Bunny. The three divine providences. The first deities that the One created were the three divine providences, Ina, Mary, and Fina. These deities write the very fate of existence from our birth, life, and death. They are gifted with prophecy beyond any oracle. Ina, the providence of birth, writes the story of our birth and chooses to whom and where we are born. She writes our character traits for which we are bestowed. Mary, the providence of life, writes the story of our rise to prominence and the middle of our existence. She writes our story of whom we fall in love with, what careers we take, and the people we encounter in life. Fina, the providence of death, writes the story of decline and eventual death. She writes the story of where we reside in old age, how we spend our end of life, and how we die. Our experience and memories in this life is not only recorded by the source, but once our story ends with our death, Fina binds our individual book of life and shelves it on the great bookcase. We are remembered for eternity. Although we are given free will as sentient beings, it is only within the confines of our predetermined story arch. This is consistent with what we find in reality in that our lives, to a great degree, are deterministic on events we had no knowledge of or are completely out of our control. However, we have free will to choose many things in our lives. However, those choices are only presented to us from those foreshadowed deeds. Most of our story, written by Mary, may be unknown to us, although we can speculate all the interconnecting pieces. All we can do is live our lives, make the choices we can, and wait out and observe what happens next in our story. Enjoy the show, learn from it. The coming age. No eyes will rise to heaven. The pure will be thought insane, and the impure will be honored as wise. The madman will be believed brave, and the wicked esteemed as good. Hermes Trismegistus. We are at an impasse in our lives as this current dawn of man comes to an interesting new stage. At the time of this writing, the New Normal slogan was broadcast on TV and print simultaneously, as if all sources read from a script. This is from oligarchic-backed news sources, while simultaneously the overabundance of information in all directions, about everything, makes any narratives about reality incoherent. With each step, the mask slips over and over, exposing the false narratives about society, government, and its leaders. The cycles of man are ever progressing, even regressing, and we are nearing the end of a cycle now. The cycles are those of innovation, political, economic, nature, and cosmic. We will be converging on three such cycles at the same time, for which will be called the coming age. Previously in history, two such cycles converged, and what occurred was the turmoil of multiple revolutions around the world from the 1750s up until the 1850s. The previous convergence was from the 1320s to the 1420s. A cycle of approximately 250 years going back far into antiquity. The events that will occur during the coming age is unknown, for no man can see the future, but history can teach us much about how the average person will respond. Chaos. What is believed to occur is a climate cycle, an economic cycle, and a war cycle converging and overlapping at the same time. This is the reason we ready our mind and body for the needs of tomorrow. What is needed for in the impending future is a set of morals, principles, and how to live one's life in the modern framework. The philosophy, the religious philosophy, and the religion of the Novum Carta will give you the what, why, who, and how for the coming age. The way. When we follow the way, we are participating responsibly in nature and acting with care of ourselves. The way is an attitude towards life and our responsibility to all things. What we allow our minds to latch on to consumes us, even for the briefest of moments. Emotions generated from this consumption elicit good or bad feelings. These feelings can create feedback loops that make us remember good or bad things, which make us feel better or worse. The way is the practice of using your mindfulness and meditation practices advocated in this book to carve a path of least emotional resistance in your life. Have you ever noticed that sometimes the plans we make get in the way of life? Sometimes the best plan is to not have a plan. Take time to relax and use your intuition. Wait. Then act. Follow your gut and trust your instincts. The worst we have to lose is our lives. If that is an impossibility in your plans or action, then all that remains is a good story or a life lesson. When we are divorced from reality, we cannot accurately guide our lives with the proper intent. Sometimes we are blinded by what we don't know. Other times we may be blinded by what we do know. Sometimes too much knowledge is a bad thing. This is why we must know ourselves as much as know about the world. We must explore the depths of ourselves as deeply as any book. We must treat ourselves with the same reverence as we do our planet and nature. You must live your life with a pro-future mindset, attitude, and follow up with proper action. Is what you do today borrowing from the future? Is your 7-bedroom home worth the wealth preservation, or could those resources be used more wisely and benefit someone less fortunate? Human-first thinking, adhering to limitless progress, and profits over eco and social responsibility are anti-future. We must accept the duality/polarity that exists within ourselves, others, nature, and the universe. As the Hermetic saying goes, as above, so below, which refers to this duality from many different perspectives. This duality is not limited to night-day, peace-war, good-bad, gender-gender, hot-cold, life-death, yin-yang, and so many more. In many instances, these dualities blend long before they are absolute in certainty, for which we must use the middle way. We must know ourselves so we know others. We must live our lives simply so our future selves can live. Understanding this and following these lessons is following the way. The Great Year. In the macrocosm of the world and the universe at large, our fates are often tied to the Great Year. As above, so below. For the listener, there is a graphic depicting the wheel of the zodiacs with emphasis on summer, spring, fall, and winter, and we are approaching winter in a few more decades. To understand the Great Year, we must define terms and explore how our Earth travels in three-dimensional space. An axis is an imaginary line on which a round body like Earth rotates. Next, an equator is a line drawn through the middle of a round body so that there are two halves of equal distance. These halves are hemispheres. An ecliptic plane is a circular path around an object that another object rotates. The Earth rotates around the Sun. The Sun rotates as it travels through space, not just around the galaxy. So, the Earth has an ecliptic and the Sun has an ecliptic. There are 12 zodiacs in astrology and astronomy whose apparent likeness can be seen from Earth. These apparent connect-the-dot drawings of the night sky have been with human consciousness since before written history. The oldest confirmed astronomical zodiac represented on a stone relief is over 12,600 years ago. Continuing, every night when looking towards the equator, a prominent astrological constellation rises from the east and sets in the west. As we transverse space, the Earth wobbles on its axis every 26,000 years so that the North Star changes. As this happens, the angle of our ecliptic also changes. When this happens, the prominent constellation changes from one to another. Over a period of 2,160 years, the constellation that appears on the horizon changes from one to another. This transversal of all the constellations is known as the Great Year. The graphic above shows this. Right now, we are in the age of Pisces and are soon to enter the age of Aquarius. But why does this matter? Because everything moves, everything has rhythm, every cause has an effect, and what happens above also happens below. The transversal of our travel through the galaxy is tied to the rhythm of life in a similar pattern to the seasons we experience on Earth. You can apply this rhythm to most things, and in conjunction with archaeology and history, we can see patterns emerge. The cycles, as discussed before, includes cosmic cycles. These celestial seasons in the Great Year correspond cyclically to events in the geological past. What we find is a clustering of volcanic and comet/asteroid activity that shaped the course of any organism living on the planet. The age of Leo begins with fire, and the age of Aquarius begins with water. The duty. Become more human, and humans will love you. Become more spiritual, and the spirit will unite with you. Become more intelligent, and the logos will unite with you. Gospel of Philip. When a Novumist becomes an initiate, they swear an oath to follow the duty. The duty is a set of principles and a plan of action. When undertaking the duty, the initiate is to forever be mindful of his or her lack of knowledge, be mindful of the people they interact with, those people's lack of understanding, and your own lack of understanding. Be mindful of the fragility of the systems that govern our minds, the world, the solar system, and beyond. Follow the precepts of their ranking. Store food for emergencies. Become a master in trade in one of the following: gardening, permaculture, blacksmithing, butchering, hunting, masonry, baking and cooking, stones, smithing, mead and winemaking, shoemaking, carpentry, plumbing, weaving, astronomy, chemistry, military, bookmaking, beekeeping. These are not the only skills one can pursue. You may choose a discipline provided that it will benefit mankind if all systems were to reset post-industrial civilization. The goal of the duty is to make the member a knowledgeable leader to be looked up to in our individual communities. We are to be as sages, druids, and oracles of the current century. These ancients were knowledgeable about all aspects of the world, both physical and supernatural. They were the members of society where the common person could look to and teach them the skills they needed for a productive life. They served many roles as we. Taking the oath of the duty can be a solemn occasion and bears with it great responsibility. For if civilization falters and is destroyed through the various means outlined in this book, it is up to you and others like you to help in the slow rebuilding through knowledge transfer. Your purpose in life is the preservation and transference of the skills you gain while a member. Rules. As with each religion or organization, we Novumists subscribe to a certain set of rules. The rules within this section are to help guide one in their daily life and morally. Psychedelics and drugs. Although we are not advocating breaking laws in any way, the use of psychedelics is permissible, given the person who partakes is age appropriate for your country and/or state. The person also needs to be mentally and physically capable of handling the conditions that occur during a psychedelic trip. Just because you can do something doesn't mean you should. Magic mushrooms have a long history with humans as a means to find salvation and become closer to God, but also as a means to personal healing from traumatic events. Partaking in substances like magic mushrooms in a responsible way to heal one's mind and body is permissible so long as the use doesn't interfere with your ability to participate in society. The use of alcohol or marijuana should be done in a responsible and meaningful way and always, of course, legally. Consumption just for the sake of consumption or escape is not responsible and adhering to the way. Language. This section is separate but derives from the path of speech. The language we use influences the world around us. The dictionary in both of our minds must match for us to make sense of the world. If someone's dictionary does not match another, then there is chaos. The same is true about words that carry emotion. Negative words when said tend to display our emotional state, or are used for emphasis of that state, when telling a story for instance. Positive words are the same way. The mind creates a figment of reality, as you read and listen. You may not be aware of this happening because it is subconscious. The story being told to you and played out in your mind creates positive or negative emotions within you. Bob, the guy at work, who always gossips and tells horrible news stories he found on the internet, is creating toxicity in your mind like a virus. How you deal with Bob is ultimately up to you, but you should be aware. Consumerism. When we replace meaning and purpose with things, we lose sight of what is real. The things we have are the replacement of tried and true relationships that once existed. To physically be in the presence of another person is not the same as seeing a person on video, on a screen, or talking to them on a phone. There is partial to full emotional segregation of what it means to be human as technology increases. The age of the personal computer created the age of the personal phone. Today we live in a strange dissociation from a world that was present before the turn of the century. The result of filling our lives with things instead of principles and people is that we remove ourselves from reality, that all of this, everything, can go away in an instant. Our lives are ending with each passing moment, and we have been tamed as men and women, as creatures to press buttons so that others can feed themselves, fill their bank accounts, and their mouths with fruits you can see but will never be able to touch. The gap between the haves and have-nots existed, but history shows once the gap between the two grows too large, so does the noose. Enter simple living, which is discussed later. Self-improvement. No one but yourself can save you from your suffering. Most of the time your suffering is internal, and created by worry or manufactured fear. This is the reason for the 6 paths of discipline. Discipline is not the same as self-improvement. Self-improvement is subconsciously wanting to change but unable or unwilling to do so, and is a patch on a gaping wound of the psyche. It is low effort. Self-improvement is driven by fear, discipline is driven by hope and knowledge. Knowledge for someone who has not hit rock bottom is perhaps unattainable unless you have been there. This is because of the subjectiveness of each person's bottom station in life. It can be as different as everyone's rise to the top. Even homelessness can be subjective. Self-improvement cannot be found in a book, but with discipline, you can escape your current station in life. Novum Carta is not a self-help or a way to self-actualize through self-improvement. You have to meet people, do things, communicate in person, with friends, family, your dog or cat, and or your guild. Improving yourself will not find what you seek, meaning. But purpose can be found through teaching others how to escape your station. In the coming age, there is no self-improvement. You will either war, destroy, or create. We are here to create. Preparedness. Novumists understand that the civilizations we see today will most likely not be there in the future. The current state is not a normal part of human existence. Humans, the cosmos, and geology have a long history of making things very tough for survival. We prepare for an eventuality that may come in our lifetimes by storing 6 months of food and supplies per person in a family. Freedom. Freedom for all things in life. We as people harbor unique perspectives about life, country, science, and everything in between. The freedom definition we adhere to is that of the ability to exercise our will and being without undue or unjust constraints subjected by individuals, groups, or hierarchies. This definition of freedom is without morality to control others' bodies, appetites, addictions, good and bad choices, and other ways to bend others to group conformance. For a Novumist, freedom is a two-way street. We give others the freedom to do as they choose, think, and act, and we expect it in return. We reserve the right to abstain from others' attempts to control our bodies and minds in conformance to our existence as free men or women. Anything less is an act that removes our free will and infringes on our natural rights. If circular reasoning of natural rights between two people due to a request, law, or edict, freedom from the cause should outweigh any other reasoning. For example, a vaccine mandate is circular in that person, A, needs to force person B into compliance so they can live. However, person B may be maimed by the vaccine or the virus, or both. Both A and B cite life and liberty per Locke as justifiable reasons. Forcing person B takes away their free will over their own life and liberty to choose a path that suits them. Person A is complicit in forcing person B to possibly sacrifice their life for them and others of the group. So, freedom from the mandate should be upheld as the correct path. Sustainability. Unsustainability is an immoral act. The weight of this is as unique as each person's situation and station in life. Is it possible for each person to own a farm, create their own goods, never use a car, and separate them entirely from the system? No, it's not. Therefore, we must use the middle way in determining our level of sustainability, and always try to find new solutions for independence. What you take from the world and what you give needs to be in balance. Taking without giving breeds dependency. Complexity and dependency need to be in balance. Dependency breeds complexity. Dependency is a force multiplier in complexity. When you and the systems you are connected to are unsustainable, at some point there is an end. There is a movement by some environmentalists to go to a zero-waste model. However, we do not advocate doing so unless you desire. What we do advocate is the middle ground between what you have now and absolute nothingness. This middle ground will look differently between individuals and families. Section: Religious Philosophy. This section of the book is going to refine the previous religion section that dealt more with cosmology than practice. Here we will outline the core beliefs of the Novum Carta with the hows and whats, how one should conduct themselves, how to interpret the world, what to believe. The 2 states, 3 truths, and 6 paths. The way in Novum Carta is applying the middle way and adhering to the states, truths, and paths. This is condensed here as a reference, but will be discussed separately. 2 states of self: the hero, the anti-hero. 3 truths of living life is suffering. The cause of suffering is craving, control, and judging. The cessation of suffering can be achieved by following the 6 paths of self-discipline. 6 paths of self-discipline. Path of livelihood. Path of action. Path of thought. Path of speech. Path of effort. Path of understanding. Symbology of the Novum Carta sigil. The symbol of the Novum Carta is the sigil found in this book and the more complicated version on the front cover. The 3-sided triangle represents the 3 truths of living. Within that framework exists the 6-sided hexagon, which represents the 6 paths of self-discipline. What exists within that framework is 2 states of self, as represented as a simple Ouroboros about to eat his tail. For those who do not understand the Ouroboros symbology, it denotes cycles, which is exactly how the 2 states of self operate, as well as everything else. The 2 states of self. The 2 states of self are ideas that are found mostly in literature but exist in our waking life as a duality of our psyche. These states are used as an identifier for our current emotional states of emotional being. They are easy to understand once explained. We ourselves can be looked at as characters existing within the confines of a movie. As actors, it can be hard to direct the movie because that is someone else's job. We can change the movie slightly by saying a few extra lines with emphasis, or improv a scene, but ultimately the ending we cannot change. We exist within a movie where the scripts of the other characters are hidden from us. As the protagonist in our own movie, there is only one reality that we can define in any given scene. That is our state of self for each scene and determines the end of the movie. These states are the hero or the anti-hero. The hero. The hero itself has many different subcategories, but in this book, we will keep it simple. The hero and the anti-hero have character traits that determine how a scene is perceived. Let us review the character traits of a hero so we are on the same page. Courage. Helpful. Integrity, resilient, confidence. Friendly. Content. Now, we are not comic book superheroes. We are men and women in the real world, and while walking the path and utilizing middle ways principles, it humbles us into radical acceptance of the world around us. That said, empathy does not appear here, nor does selflessness, but helpful does. Even the most narcissistic and sociopathic person lacking empathy can still understand the human need of and concept of helpful. Note that nowhere in this list did bravery appear either. Courage is facing a task despite fear, whereas bravery is facing a task with no fear. Courage is for smart people who can predict the future, within reason, and know the situation they are going to be in. They have a pretty good idea of what the next few scenes will be in their movie. Bravery is a dissociated fear and being the proverbial meat in a grinder. Bravery has a purpose, but for the average person, everyday courage is acceptable. A hero is not always happy but content. We try in vain to self-improve and strive for an unattainable reality of infinite happiness. We have believed the marketing by pharmaceutical companies that the natural state of existence is in happiness. This is not the case. Imagine living in the 1600s. Take a moment. Do you think anyone classified as introverted could exist to the extent they are now without hundreds of books and no means to purchase these luxury items? Do you think people existed in infinite happiness watching the clouds for hours and contending in their own thoughts? If you threw a teenager today into the period of the 1600s, the chemical withdrawal in the brain could produce psychosis in the true dopamine addicted. A hero has meaning and purpose. These are not bestowed to you by a purpose God existing in the heavens who shines down a purpose ray on you during the night. Meaning and purpose are found at the bottom of a bottle of whiskey, or while taking a dump and reading the back of a shampoo bottle. It may be extreme, but it's true. When we are content in life and find our purpose, we exist as the hero in our story and in others. As the hero, we can live a productive and content existence. The antihero. Chaos drives the antihero because they lack a justified existence and moral purpose. Be aware, we are not talking about the villain or anti-villain here. If you intend to be the villain or anti-villain, you are reading the wrong book, as psychopathy is not beneficial to humanity. The difference between the antihero and the anti-villain is approximate of this. The antihero is someone who possesses less than noble qualities and is flawed, but their morality is intact or lacking insight, but generally, they mean well. The anti-villain is someone who possesses some good qualities but whose morality is absent and they intend to harm. The antihero is someone you want to help. The anti-villain is someone you want to be destroyed. The antihero will possess some of the same qualities as the anti-villain but will generally have the following characteristics. Antisocial and or narcissistic. A wavering sense of morality, lacks integrity and honor. This state is complex, but it exists within us. You may remember a time when that state you experienced was abundantly clear. In this state, you may have the charm to sway and use people in order to achieve your goals. Generally, the state of the anti-hero is out for its own interests and betterment. The purpose is usually self-serving, and goals and meaning driving the state are driven by selfishness. People possessing this state may have a grim outlook on life because they view the world in a hyper-realistic and negative, in every way. Removing the anti-hero elements of your life takes effort, but you and the world will be better for it. These states exist within us and show their presence daily or just on holidays or around your ex-spouse. Some of us present more of the anti-hero than the hero. Sometimes these states are triggered by events, words, or people. With each event that we encounter and experience, our life further dictates the use of these states driven by emotion. These states influence our decisions. Our decisions dictate events. An endless cycle of events, states, and decisions. It's usually a negative state. Once we understand this point, we can find out how to deal with them. How do we back away from the anti-hero state and focus on being the hero in our lives and the lives of others? Embracing the 3 truths of living is the first step. Walking the path and being able to identify these shifts and states is the goal. The 3 truths of living. The 3 truths of living are borrowed from Buddhism and updated slightly with modern thought. The 3 truths are: 1. Life is suffering. 2. The cause of suffering is craving, control, and judging. 3. The cessation of suffering can be achieved by following the 6 paths of self-discipline. Life is suffering, even for the wealthy, although, let's be honest, it probably not as much as others, different sure, but not primitively. General suffering though includes birth, illness, old age, separation from friends or family, addiction, and negative emotions. Being alive is suffering. The root cause of this suffering ultimately is due to our craving for something we currently can have or want to have. This is desire. We want to live in abundance and infinite happiness, but one day we will die. All that we strived for and accumulated will be for naught unless we have children. We want to spend time with our children, but as they grow, they will seldom talk to us because you are in the middle of a divorce. Maybe you are a millionaire without a prenup, and your husband cheats on you. We want the pretty girl in class to go out with us, but we have no self-esteem to ask her out. The new iPhone 32 was released today, but you have terrible credit from unforeseen circumstances and simply can't obtain it. Suffering has no bounds. It doesn't care about your identity. It is all-encompassing and brutal. When we encounter suffering, we attempt often in vain to control the situation. Sometimes we even try to control the good things. When we grasp for control, we can create even more suffering. Suffering can build on suffering when we try to control. When we judge the people and events around us, that is also control and creates suffering. Oftentimes craving, control, and judging are cyclical and feed off one another, which creates self-replicating feedback loops. Only through self-discipline and letting go can we achieve the end of suffering and craving. This is where Buddhism and the Novum Carta depart. Buddhism says that attempting to control your mind or your body creates more suffering. We disagree and take the middle path approach. Utilizing discipline through mindfulness, identifying the negative thoughts or actions, and redirecting them into meaningful outputs is the correct way to live in our age. The means by which one obtains self-discipline are called the 6 paths. We will go into greater detail now. The 6 paths of self-discipline. The 6 paths of self-discipline are borrowed again from Buddhism and updated slightly with modern thought. Buddhism calls this the Eightfold Path. For Novumists, they have been simplified. Path of livelihood, path of thought, path of action, path of speech, path of effort, path of understanding. Our existence as humans falls within these 6 paths. Walking the path is a concept that one does when attempting to live within the guides here. At any stage in our lives, we may be stronger in some areas than in others, but as long as you practice mindfulness, the middle way, you can walk the path to greatness. The path of livelihood. Livelihood is a foundational principle that takes all paths below. It refers to one not living in extreme abundance, with an eye towards minimalism, but capable of being self-reliant, while embracing the middle way. This is not living in poverty but not living abundantly materially wealthy as well. It means not being in a profession that goes against the path of action. It means that you are utilizing the paths of thought, effort, and understanding when making decisions on how to live a moral and purpose-driven life. Path of thought. The path of thought refers to being able to identify and bear witness to one's own mind and the minds of others. This means practicing mindfulness to identify the activities of the body that may bring about emotions, and ideas, and thoughts that bring suffering. Know yourself in and out, better than anyone ever could. It is a driving force for the path of action. It means the renunciation of the self and ego while focusing on thoughts of the path of effort. Path of action. The path of action is all about our abilities to perform morally good actions by being honorable and having high morals. You can achieve this by not stealing for wealth or pleasure, manipulation for profit or gain, or murdering a person. Killing an animal to feed oneself is justified so long as it is honorable, and the animal's meat is used for consumption by you or another. Killing for pleasure is wrong, and anything outside of providing substance for yourself or another is not morally just. Killing a lion or elephant where the meat is left to be consumed by nature is not the same as killing a deer to feed your family. Climbing the corporate or political hierarchy by using others as leverage is not walking the path of action. Most of the time it usually involves internal violations of speech or thought or manipulating others, which is also a violation. Path of speech. When we talk, we should not lie, slander, or be malicious, and always use proper thought before speaking. When we focus on our speech, we remove ourselves from wrong and harmful speech that could lead to bad actions. It also means we must speak the truth when it may be inappropriate to do so. Use words that are benevolent and meaningful. Negative words create negativity. Positive words create positivity. Try it. Path of effort. When we choose and maintain the paths, we are embracing the path of effort. It can be a conscious daily endeavor to adhere to the paths and to do good action in the world. We are all born differently, but if we try and continue to try, we are walking the path of effort. Effort means to have the right speech and to keep trying when we fail. When we fail at thought, we learn from our mistakes. When we fail at action, we apologize, make up for it, and strive for betterment. Instead of falling into a victim mindset or letting others put us into victim status, we put forth effort to make our situation better. It means that we are striving to have good livelihood. Path of understanding. The path of understanding is knowing that at the end of our lives that the majority of everything we will do will be for naught. It doesn't mean there isn't a point to our existence, but rather the culmination of everything you learned or achieved was for someone else's benefit, your children, grandchildren, or friends. It is found in accepting that living in the present moment, the now, is more important than planning for a future that we may not see. However, you must also take into account that the future may be turbulent, and you may need to prepare for the unknown. The key is not to be absorbed by planning for the unknown, or not planning. The path of understanding is knowing that life is suffering and that all life is suffering from different angles. Understanding means we must take action to make the world have less suffering, but we must first start with ourselves before helping others. The middle way. As a thought experiment, imagine we must increase how far a bird can fly. A bird can only fly as fast as its wings can take it. Its wings are dependent on the type of bird it is and its attributes, the wing size, how full its belly is, or its internal cognitive drive. Obviously, the problem here is that we need to get rid of the air since air is holding the bird back from achieving its goals, right? This is an absurdist representation of the problem, but such notions and solutions to today's problems are happening in society today. Even in our own minds, absurd solutions breed. The middle way is a means by which one looks to either extremes, choices, or states of being, and chooses the middle between the two. What is the middle way between bad and good? Love and hate? It is the gray area between any choice or any state. Dialectical behavior therapy, DBT, was created in part to help people with borderline personality disorder, BPD. Those with BPD suffer because many are unable to find the gray area in their lives. Many people who have been diagnosed with this deliberating lifelong mental illness are only able to see and do one extreme or another. And so, with people who have this trouble and people who do not, the middle way may be for one to explore either side of this duality, to research the extremes, with thought experiments or engagement. And once either side is examined, this person then drifts towards the middle. How can you understand a Republican if you have not embraced the idealism for yourself? Or vice versa? The following quote sums up this concept nicely. If you know the enemy and know yourself, you need not fear the result of 100 battles. If you know yourself but not the enemy, for every victory gained you will also suffer a defeat. If you know either the enemy nor yourself, you will succumb in every battle. Sun Tzu, The Art of War. If you are incapable or unwilling to embrace the idealisms of any side, of anything, you cannot find the middle way. Exploration of any side of the duality creates a better person, a whole person, where there wasn't one before. Imagine yourself in a chess match against an opponent who is going to destroy the foundations of your ideals or beliefs or identity. You must argue for and against everything you hold dear. Philosophers do this by arguing for their position and against it in a single book. Once you have contemplated everything, even your existence, then maybe you can walk the middle way. Once you have achieved this, you will find the duality of nature, yin and yang, yes or no, true or false, good and bad, 1 and 0, and others. You will find that these are merely words to describe a concept, and may in fact exist on a scale and up to interpretation to a point. The duality of the yin-yang symbol illustrates this point perfectly as one color fades into another. Humanity even exists within a spectrum of experiences, as no two people are alike. Even the law exists on a spectrum because it is ruled by people. Even murder can be justified. For example, a man is caught on video walking up to another person and shoots them. Unfortunately, this happens every day. Then the shooter declares he did it because his lover cheated on him with the recently deceased. During the trial, we hear an astonishing testimony of how the cheater stole $1 million, kicked the accused from the home, and threatened legal action against them because the deceased had wooed them into doing so. It seems everyone here is in the wrong, but in this instance, the composition of the jury decides a 5-year prison term is adequate instead of the death penalty. The accused did in fact kill someone. Given another time or the act of fate, a different composition of jurors, the accused might have been sent to death row. Human experience and actions exist on multiple spectrums. This is not arguing for the subjective nature of everything, for there are objective and quantifiable realities. Even if you extrapolate our universe as existing on a fractal to be destroyed as if it never existed, to begin with, objectively you exist at this moment. Most experiences and actions reside within the confines of the reasonably predictable. In the era of big data, we can see this play out in statistical distribution, the dreaded bell curve. When many hear of the bell curve, they only think of the short-sightedness of their point of view, that the bell curve is inherently racist, misogynistic, or phobic in some way. That was never its intent, and changing language does not mean its original intent isn't used every day in schools and places of business. For if all humans are unique, and all experiences and actions are subjective, that means everything has a bell curve. Every state a human can be, or experience, or do can be statistically represented. The center of the bell curve is where we want our experiences and actions to reside. We must not all follow the flow of ideology, or the whims of the pack leader. In fact, contrarianism might be what is needed to prevent the ebb and flow of society from marching off a proverbial cliff in any direction. Altruism can disguise as evil and can be just as controlling. Behind every human disaster and genocide was noble intention where the end justifies the means. Utopian idealism can only result from authoritarian systems of control because humans possess the abilities to imagine being willfully corralled and wholesomely freed while having the abilities to enact both realities. Every failed civilization has done this, and in a very predictable manner. There are numerous historical accounts for this. In such times, a firm middle way is needed to prevent the flow of power in whichever direction it is pulled. This is not just a political or sociological matter. The middle way is about everything you do or say, and only through mindfulness can we examine our thoughts, actions, and feelings. Alchemy. The world can be best understood and applied by using alchemical reasoning to all things. Alchemy was once the precursor to chemistry that gave rise to our modern world, but has since taken on new meanings and, in so doing, new ways of understanding the world. The graphic above illustrates the relationship of rigid order and pure chaos, and of balance between the middle way. This logic can be applied to the duality of existence and experience as whole. The following illustrations will drive home the Hermetic principle of polarity until it is blue in the face, and in doing you will come to see practical examples of this. Several graphics that depict how order becomes balance. You can clearly see the polarity between many things in terms of what is chaotic and what is order. All things can be graphed on a scale between order, balance, chaos. Viewing the world in terms of what is chaos and what is order will allow you to how to find balance in the world and within yourself. That balance is determined by various characteristics found within the base alchemical elements: earth, water, air, and fire. How you find that balance is in knowing your characteristics as a person and knowing your astrological sign. From an astrological standpoint, the day of your birth determines your birth element. You can think of the characteristics of your birth as your background attributes you may exhibit in your personality. However, this doesn't always apply to everyone, but you can see below some of those characteristics and associate your zodiac sign with an alchemical element. Birth date: zodiac element January 21st to February 19th, Aquarius, air, February 20th, March 20th, Pisces, water. March 21st, April 20th, Aries, fire. April 21st to May 21st, Taurus, earth. May 22nd to June 21st, Gemini, air. June 22nd to July 22nd, Cancer, water. July 23rd to August 21st, Leo, fire. August 22nd to September 23rd, Virgo, earth. September 24th to October 23rd, Libra, air. October 24th to November 22nd, Scorpio, water. November 23rd to December 22nd, Sagittarius, fire. December 23rd to January 20th, Capricorn, earth. Element characteristics: earth, cold, order, obey, predictable, equal, objective, determinism, self-sacrifice. Water, cool, calm, learn, predictable, equal, objective, probabilistic, non-aggression. Air, warm, turbulent, teach, unpredictable, free, subjective, probabilistic, self-defense. Fire, hot, chaos, dictate, unpredictable, free, subjective, free will, sacrifice others. These elements are not just for understanding yourself, but the attributes and characteristics can be used to better understand our reality as well. The alchemical elements themselves refine the order, balance, chaos spectrum into further categorization and refinement that we can use to transmute ourselves and the world. The original alchemical definition for transmutation was the changing of one physical element into another, and this concept was how chemistry was born. In religious terms, transmutation is changing one element into another. One does this by manipulating or instantiating vibrational energy, a Hermetic principle. Imagine yourself as a hot-headed, chaotic person. In order to change oneself into something different, you change your thoughts, attitudes, and perceptions about the world. In doing so, the vibrational energy is shifted from chaos to order or something in between. A similar technique is found in the Christian affirmations movement, or those who follow the law of attraction. The rationale is quite simple in that positive thoughts and emotions result in a positive life, whereas negativity begets negativity. Transmutation is effectively the same, albeit more detailed in its approach through using specifics as outlined in this entire chapter. This is not limited to just thoughts and perceptions, but also the material and society. The concepts, ideas, inventions, movies, politics, etc. that are put into the ether of our collective societies fall within the order, balance, chaos, earth, water, air, fire spectrum. If there is too much fire in the world, then earth, water, air is needed, or vice versa. If there is too much earth, fire, then water, air is required. For those who create, we must strike a balance and transmute accordingly. Mindfulness. As one Buddhist monk once stated, mindfulness is the ability to be able to quiet the monkey mind. The monkey mind is about a monkey going apeshit and jumping from thought to thought with little to no processing of information. The monkey is just in the emotional state and dissociates the outside and inner world. A lot of New Age people equate mindfulness as simply meditation, but it is more than that. Yes, you can practice mindfulness meditation and sit in your thoughts. However, it takes massive willpower to practice it while doing everything else in your life, and that is the goal. When you practice mindfulness for everyday living, you can extrapolate the causes for everything in your life, past and present. With mindfulness techniques, you are able to acknowledge when a thought enters your mind and visually let it go. If you've ever had a cussing problem and had to be around kids for an extended period of time, you may swear once, acknowledge it occurred, swear again, but catch yourself and stop swearing on the third time. Mindfulness is catching thoughts or actions and redirecting or finding the source of that thought and correcting it. For those who have panic attacks, deep deliberating ones that are so severe that you are stuck in your mind until it is over, mindfulness may be a source to break free. These people may use mindfulness to reflect and find the source or trigger of the thoughts that created the attack. This is literally where the word trigger comes from. It is from mindfulness exercises by psychologists. To begin mindfulness, you don't need anything, you just need to follow these very simple instructions. 1. Turn off all sounds in your rooms and turn your phone to silent. 2. Sit down on the floor and shut up. 3. Observe thoughts when they occur, thank them, and discard them visually in a folder you will access when you are done. That's all you need to do. You don't need to worry about breathing, you need to just sit and shut up and watch your thought patterns. When you do this for 6 to 8 weeks, you can move on to do this in daily life, when cooking, taking a shower, or other. When you really focus and try to obtain mindfulness while doing daily tasks, the insight you can gain about yourself and the world can be almost overpowering. It is akin to a superpower that very few people understand. At this point, you are closer to dissolving the ego accidentally or at will. You should not fear this, as it is not permanent. Everyone in Hollywood pays gurus hundreds of thousands of dollars to attain enlightenment, or jhana, during meditation. I am here to tell you that enlightenment doesn't last forever, but the insight gain does. Jhanas don't last long, but the insight gain from it does as well. Mindfulness will get you there. Meditation in combination with mindfulness is the key. Meditation. Meditation has been proven to be beneficial to your wellness physically and mentally. It can help you gain insight, aid in digestion, may lower heart rate, and may lower blood pressure in certain people. Each person should try to set aside at least 10 minutes in a week to meditate, but studies have shown that for the long-term health benefits to kick in should be around 30 minutes. How you choose to meditate is up to you, but the preferred way is through the Theravada tradition, samatha, in Buddhism. This is mindfulness of one's thoughts and watching the breath. There is also walking meditation, where one uses mindfulness as they count each step they take in a methodical fashion. Through meditation, one can achieve jhana or dhyana. Jhana is an altered state of consciousness. As you progress from the first stage and beyond, you will emotionally feel an increase in joy, and with more progress, your ego will dissolve and you become all with nothing. Each stage of jhana is different. Some cultures have 10 stages of jhana, others just 1. There seem to be a common denominator, though, that each stage brings unique sensations to the mind and body. The first 3 jhana are lesser in experience. You will feel calmness, stillness, and content that culminates into joy towards the end. As you approach the 4th through the 6th stage, you enter a state of oneness, then non-existence entirely. Like you are experiencing who or what you were before you are born, nothing. To enter these stages takes practice. The more you force trying to attain it, the harder a jhana state is to achieve. When you experience one, it is a life-altering event, even more so than your first kiss, and may be on par with your child's birth. I must start first from the ground up. Everything has a start. How to meditate. There are multiple ways to meditate, but this section is going to be the very basic and simplest way to meditate. Before we even get into the steps, there are 2 ways to approach meditation. 1. Go in with a clear mind. 2. Or start with emotional baggage. Choose the latter every time. It would be nice to enter meditation when you are feeling your best, but in reality, when you are sad, angry, depressed, that is the moment you need meditation. Follow these steps and give it a try. Look online and watch others do it. 1. Set a 10-minute timer. 2. Sit on the floor and get comfortable. Put down a pillow or a towel or blanket if you'd like. Hang out for a few moments and get all the shifting out. 3. Close your eyes and focus on your breath. Take a deep breath in, hold it, and slowly release. After 3 times, continue to breathe normally while focusing on breathing in and out. 4. Repeat this until the timer goes off. Continue this a few times a month, or ideally a week, and start to incorporate mindfulness. If you find it hard, then awesome. It is supposed to be hard. Who would have thought that? Breathing and focusing your mind on nothing was such hard work? Mindfulness and meditation are to the mind, as bodybuilding and weights are to muscles. Rituals and magic. To honor the gods, we use rituals. To will the world around us, we use magic. The basics of magic are a very simple concept to understand. You essentially will the world in the direction you need it to go. You do this through ritual, setting, and place. Anyone who has consumed mushrooms or ayahuasca understands the importance of setting and place, which is another simple concept. Good vibes lead to good times. The same is true for rituals on a fundamental level, even if you do not believe in magic. Before you perform a ritual, you typically know what outcome you want to achieve. The same is true before a mushroom trip. Your brain starts to switch gears months, days, and seconds beforehand. You want a good trip with good intentions. When you are performing a ritual, your entire mind is centered on the immediate tasks at hand. The world around you typically disappears, dissociates, or becomes out of focus and less impactful. For example, your shitty dad or shitty son and their antics are no longer a driving force for anger. Your boss not giving you a raise is not centered in your mind, causing distress. You are in a different set of moments performing a task. The chaos of life and the negativity in your mind may seem less intense, like turning the knob down in your brain. Your brain centers on the ritual and focuses on the desired outcome. To the skeptic who does not believe in the deities within the confines of this book, it doesn't really matter because the ritual's intentions are subconsciously carried by the brain working towards that goal, or that outcome, or the intention of the ritual. I subscribe that both spectrums, psychological and the divine, are occurring simultaneously, fulfilling a ritual's intent. When you commune with God, or the gods, through ritual, you are making your intent known. Humanistically, you are telling yourself what outcome you want to achieve, and in doing that, intent enters your subconsciousness or compartmentalized somewhere in the recesses of your mind, and your brain helps guide you towards those goals. Spiritually, your intention is made known, and it drifts on the ethereal winds to be enacted by the God of your choosing or left to the providences to be scripted. When you leave a ritual, you are no longer pissed at your boss or disappointed in your son. You have released your emotions internally or maybe gained insight while performing it. You are no longer plagued by suffering, at least momentarily. That is why rituals are done and were performed for tens of thousands of years. Rituals combined with mindfulness and meditation are a winning combination of great internal satisfaction and help release internal suffering. Novumists engage in several different types of rituals. Initiation. When one becomes a Novumist, they go through an initial initiation ritual. It's a non-formal occasion where you meet with the master of the guild and a witness. The master gives a short speech, and you state your discipleship and pledge to the duty. As you progress in rank from apprentice to journeyman, the occasion becomes more formal and more responsibility is taken on to oneself. By the time you become an expert as a journeyman, you should possess expert-level knowledge and at least 2 trade skills. If you choose to become a master, a leader of a guild, a formal occasion will be held with a grand master and a seer. This occasion is similar to that of obtaining the 32 degrees of stone masonry. Storytelling. History is passed down from us through stories created from events. Likewise, knowledge is passed down to us through stories as well. Many of these are myths, and many are so fanciful that on the surface they defy logic. The deluge myth, however, is scientifically accurate to have occurred during the life of modern humans, but many yet believe that such a story is fanciful. Did Noah actually exist? Who is to say if he was real or not, because the true story is that of a worldwide calamity that is geologically proven. As Novumists, we craft simple stories that are hard forgotten that can be shared for all. These stories may be told during initiation or ritual or other such occasions such as holidays. They serve as a beacon in a rapidly secularizing world culturally absent of collective stories and myths. Magic. There are a few ways that one can perform magic within a ritual setting, whether that be at home, with friends, or at a ceremony. I urge you to do some research on your own and explore how other people perform magic rituals as long as you follow the middle way. These magic ritual techniques are generally classified as follows. 1. Purification. 2. Invocation. 3. Banishment. 4. Sigil. A note to the uninitiated: enough information is given within this book to begin your own path, but I would issue extreme caution when invoking deities, or entities when in general practice. Magic is itself chaotic by nature. The path to the end goal may not look what you want it to. If you seek money and are not specific, or through invoking those you shouldn't, you may lose your job, all your belonging, and be homeless. Then when you decide to kill yourself one day because you can't get a job, you get a phone call that leads to a great job making more than you did before previous to being homeless. Do not invoke chaos. Purification magic. Purification magic is just as it sounds. You purify your body, item, or home. Purification magic generally involves heavy bodily preparation, including fasting, dieting, and abstinence. During this ritual, you clean your body in oils or water while sage is burnt. Water and oils are typically used as a medium of transference. Invocation magic. Invocation can be as simple as a prayer or spell, but one should always invoke a deity when performing invocations. This is because when you put your mind out there in the source, it acts as a beacon, and whatever is listening may answer back. Prayers and rituals for this are listed in the back of the books. Magic banishment. magic banishment refers to removing negative attachments and influences on yourself, an item, or home. These items can be influenced by fate, luck, or entities out of our range of perception. This type of magic usually requires fasting and specific rituals. It also requires knowing the type of influence these objects are under. Sigil magic. Sigil magic is the art of drawing a concept on a piece of paper and binding it, hiding it, or burning it. This art comes in the form of lines, circles, geometric shapes, letters, and more. A sigil is on the first page of this book. Entire books are devoted to this type of magic. An example of a sigil is on the next page. Sin, salvation, and good and evil. There is no such thing as original sin in the Novum Carta. We are humans being humans in a divinely created world in part for our existence, so we cannot have sin for merely being as we are. Sin in Novum Carta is called transgression. These transgressions are categorized as either human or spiritual and come in varying levels of subjective severity. Transgression that causes bodily harm to humans wherein that human life could have been extinguished is called transgressing the right of life. This means taking a human life is a sin, assault is a sin, and stealing that causes harm is a sin. There is no concept of accidental or political exclusions into the right of life. Abortion is transgressing. If you are on a mountain top and you trip and push someone off the top of the mountain and that person dies, you transgressed. If you are in a riot and your actions caused a fire where someone was greatly burned, you transgressed. If you kill a person who killed other people, you have transgressed. Transgressing can also extend to the spiritual. Spiritual transgression comes in the form of not following the will of the gods. This will is commanded through voice, appearances, or synchronicities. Synchronicities are two seemingly unrelated events that are subjectively correlated, meaningful, and significant to the observer. These events are entirely dependent on you to both determine and experience, and can be as unique as any random experience can be. They are a hint at destiny if you choose to follow the path before you. There is no concept of being saved in the Novum Carta. Even if you accidentally murder another person and transgress the right of life, there is no spiritual repentance for that. That is your experience to bear, and what happens to you as a consequence is between men and their laws. However, that is not to say that people are irredeemable. We should treat all people with the utmost of respect regardless of their unique attributes unless proven otherwise at an individual level. In using the middle way, we cannot allow ourselves to be overly tolerant or overly intolerant. If you are transgressed and a person makes amends, that can be considered salvation, but there is no spiritual salvation in Novum Carta because we are either born with sin or without. Some people are born bad and others good, however what makes a person good and one bad is not as rigid as you might expect. In fact, there is probably more likely that evil and doing bad things is easier than not. Doing good takes work, self-reflection, planning, and moral judgment. Doing good is a balancing act in times of peace and prosperity, and when those times go away, doing good takes even more work. Human life will do as human life does, and there is little that can be done. Humans try to control other humans or use others to get what they do not have. That will always exist, as you cannot change the human animal, and be wary of those that try. We must have acceptance of this, of the nature of good and evil. Good and evil events are more often human-created than not, and so we must turn to the sources of our suffering or accept that suffering. Because of our nature, we will never live in pure harmony amongst other humans. Politics will not fix this. Resources will not fix this. Nor will the gods intervene. To live without good and evil is to exist without duality. To exist in pleasure alone is to live without contrast, and in so doing you wouldn't know what good is. Without contrasting colors, you wouldn't even know what colors were. To remove the ability for humans to balance the good with the bad makes us a new species. Not better than what we are. Not as the gods. But be made as an animal lower than a dog who has knowledge of good and evil and is capable of doing either. Shared experiences. Shared experiences are things that can be done as you age and experience while in a guild, group, and as a society. These experiences are a foundation where people can find common ground regardless of creed, religion, race, gender, or background. In today's fractured society, it seems that the ideologies, whether those be about race, gender, sex, or political party, seem more of a dividing wedge than one of collaboration in a shared societal goal that isn't elitist or partisan. These experiences listed in this chapter can serve as a way to bring people together through experience. The only way that the shared experiences listed here can be enacted and brought to life is by a central governing body to disperse funds. It will be very abundant as to why when you read. The aim is to not have megachurches or hospitals, but rather to fund the ability for people to maximize their life on this earth and to self-actualize at a young age to create great things. The experiences and concepts in this section are capable through monthly tithings to the organization. These funds are spent only on members and not on things to gain favor with political organizations, corporations, governments, or others. These funds act as a safety net for members and ultimately their children. There is a lot of talk about training and shared experiences. The reader might ask as to what the training is for eventually. The answer to that is as simple as to why the government wants you working. Members with children who grow in the organization pay dues, and the more potential these people have to do great, the more return we get. That's not always monetary. Sometimes that is through volunteering or talking about how the organization helped them. The end goal in training is to create a well-rounded and productive member of society that aligns with the duty. Let's begin these shared experiences. Experiences. No longer a child. Males at age 13, a boy and his father or mentor go on a hunt for an animal to feed their family. If a father figure is unavailable, a mentor will be substituted by a willing, knowledgeable male family member, or someone in the guild or organization will act as a mentor for that child. The hunt will be conducted with appreciation to state laws. Females, the year a girl gets their first period is a time of womanhood and unique social responsibility. In the first year of her period, the newly appointed woman will need to spend 2 days with her mom or a mentor, living with a family of their choosing, who has a newborn between the ages of 4 and 8 months. Any biological woman who has not had or is incapable of having menstruation will need to perform the above before entering high school. Choosing an intellectual passion. Every teenager on their 15th birthday is free to choose 2 free books among the following disciplines paid for by the organization: epistemology, metaphysics, ethics, logic, aesthetics, physics/math, history, theology. Learn to save a life. Every teenager on their 16th birthday must be certified in BLS, basic life support, and attend a basic nutrition class paid for by the guild or organization. If you can drive a car, a mechanism for taking a life, you need to learn how to save a life. Nutrition classes will teach you how to save yours. Spiritual choice. In the 17th year, the child of a Novumist is presented with a choice to continue with the organization or not. Failing to become a member, they will receive a laptop on their graduation with all the hopes in the world. A continuing member will begin to pay dues. Graduation. For a member who fails to graduate high school, an assessment is made by family members. Those with personality disorders, certain psychological disorders, or discipline issues are sent to intervention training. A determination will be made by those with cognitive issues as to which training may be best suited, if any. After successful graduation from high school, every member is sent to a trade training. After completing trade training, they are sent to basic military training. A determination may be made at this point for those who are in special classes for learning disabilities. Total disability may be an option, or being sent to basic life training. Trade training. This training is similar to American Job Corps, paid for by the organization for 9 months of room and board, if needed, for hands-on education in the following: welding, nursing, dental assistant, electrical, carpentry, automotive, masonry, and more. Basic military training. This training is similar to ROTC, but it is branch independent, and the focus is more general. That focus is on independent and group training. Civilian basic combat training. Independent and group training is about understanding human psychology, biology, and introducing basic survival skills and concepts. Some middle schools or high schools have survival training classes. This is the same. Civilian basic combat training utilizes the current standard of IET, Army Initial Entry Training. However, PT is reduced 50%, and instead of weapons training, the use of mixed martial arts is substituted. Why is there combat training? Because no member should ever be in fear from another person, to gain insight into the limits of their body, and to experience physical discipline. Intervention training. This training is geared as preventative measures to keep the person who failed high school out of the criminal justice system. The program is run similar to the current IT in that a daily schedule is introduced, and PT is reduced by 25%. Personal skills revolve around Criminal Justice 101, Coping and Relaxation Skills Group, Dialectical Behavior Therapy. Failure to pass this training due to psychological pathological personality issues such as psychopathy or sociopathy that results in an unwillingness to participate. Such member will be ineligible for financial assistance in the organization. This will need to be confirmed by an outside medical examiner independent of the organization and approved. Basic life training. This training is used primarily to give a person who has a disability the skills needed to help them cope with their life now and into the future. The program is run similarly to the current IT in that a modified daily schedule is introduced, and PT is reduced by 90%, but with more of an emphasis on building a daily routine. Personal skills revolve around insight and reflection into their disability. Coping and Relaxation Skills Group, Dialectical Behavior Therapy. After completion of this program, a determination will be made as if the person should be on total disability, which will need to be confirmed by 2 independent medical professionals outside the organization. If a disability is awarded, the organization will present the disabled person's family with a laptop they can use. After successful completion, the person will go to trade training. A person with a disability will not go to basic military training and be sent to the 3 choices. They will also not participate in the awakening. The awakening. After someone has completed all the training necessary to become a well-rounded person, within their abilities, they must take one final step before going on to the 3 choices. The awakening occurs on the first full moon after the person's 20th birthday, and is to occur no less than that age. The 3 choices will be postponed until that time. A family who does not wish for the awakening to occur can opt out. The awakening is a spiritual unleashing in the person's mind by taking a single dose of psilocybin where the person is psychologically able to participate. A special facility in a state where psilocybin is legal will be able to accept you and your family. The awakening is performed in an appropriate facility whose sole purpose is to perform spiritual guidance through the use of psilocybin through a shamanistic ritual. While at the facility, the person will be supervised by trained people, including medical doctors. During the event, you are welcome to join in the festivities but separate from your son or daughter's initial journey. The entire encounter is filmed for transparency. After the awakening, the person can move on to the 3 choices when they are ready. The 3 choices. After a person completes the awakening, they are presented with a basic laptop and 3 choices that will determine their future. There is no time limit when one can choose so long as the organization is able. The 3 choices are: entrepreneurship, training 4-month daily courses on basic accounting, businesses formation, and businesses functions will be given to the person who chooses this path. An administrator will help them create a business entity and a business plan. Completing this training, the person will be given $4,000. College training. Those choosing this path have up to 42 credits towards an associate's level degree credits in any public college paid for, providing that academic acceptance criterion are met. Education, food, and books are expenses covered, room and board are not. Military training. Those choosing a military path will be presented with $8,000 that will be invested. An accredited investor will work with this person as to the appropriate investing methods for that individual to return to once they complete their tour. Family experiences. Parents' Day Out. Every other Saturday or Sunday in a month, a family with children, with the youngest above the age of 3, will be designated for parental time off. The children will be taken care of, watched over by a teenage girl between the ages of 16-19. This entire day and night up to midnight will be up to the parents to decide. This time off will be paid for by the organization of a weekly benefit card of $60 bi-weekly for an outing. This card can only be used in restaurants or entertainment venues, but nothing is classified solely as a bar or nightclub. Benefits amounts do not roll over at the end of the month. Holiday experiences. The following holidays are sanctioned, but it is up to the individual if they choose to adhere to this list. Celebrations should be done in nature when possible. Yule the last Saturday in December, Lupercalia February 15th, Balance Day March 20th, Beltane May 1st, Midsummer the last Saturday in June, Autumn Harvest the last Saturday in September, Day of the Dead October 31st. Why Yule? Yule is celebrated by giving gifts to friends and family. If celebrating in a group, a feast will be had. A celebration should be had with white wine. If you are unfamiliar with Yule, it is like Christmas in that it is celebrated around the same time of the year. In fact, Yule was co-opted by Christians and the traditions were almost completely wiped out. You celebrate the end of the year, the winter solstice to be exact, and the beginning of a new year. In December, you can make or purchase a Yule wreath and hang it above your fireplace or on your door. You can purchase a Yule tree and decorate it simply. Some pagan faiths will celebrate Yule for much of the month, but a Novumist will celebrate on the last Saturday in December. During this time, you exchange gifts in the morning or afternoon with those who share your faith. Lupercalia, the original Valentine's Day, will be celebrated by giving a single gift to a loved one. If celebrating in a group, a feast will be had with red wine. Balance Day celebrates the time when the amount of daylight is equal to the amount of nightfall, otherwise known as the spring equinox. On this day we celebrate the first day of spring. On March 19th, a Novumist will do a full day fast before Balance Day if they are medically capable. On March 20th, for those who choose to celebrate this day, should go camping in nature and have a feast by fire. Offerings in the celebration should be food burned by a campfire or burning bowl. Beltane this day celebrates the beginning of summer. Those who choose to celebrate this day should go camping in nature and have a feast by fire and accompanied by fresh mead. Offerings in the celebration should be food burned by a campfire. Midsummer this day celebrates the middle of summer. Those who choose to celebrate this day should go camping in nature and have a Feast by fire and be accompanied by pale ale. Offerings in the celebration should be food burned by campfire. Autumn harvest. This day celebrates the end of summer on the last day of September. Those who choose to celebrate this day should go camping in nature and have a feast by fire and be accompanied by wheat beer. Offerings in the celebration should be food burned by campfire. Day of the Dead. This holiday will be repurposed as a time we celebrate life and honor the dead who perished due to the climatic. Each year everyone participating will purchase a helium-filled balloon and a small bright LED light source. This light is tied to the balloon. At 10 p.m. a family or individual will give thanks to their life, and the lives of their loved ones, then release the balloon into the sky. Philosophy. Section Philosophy. In this section we will delve into harder philosophical topics. In continuing with the previous section, we will continue with the hows and whats, how to interpret the world, how to live one's life, and what to believe. Limits of complexity. The philosophy and purpose around Novum Carta largely fall on the premise that as the entropy of a system increases, so does its propensity for failure. Similarly, if the entropy in the universe increases, it will cause it to no longer exist. Defining systems. A system is a group of individual components that perform a function. Systems can have subsystems that produce their own function that typically benefits the higher system or other systems around it. These functions usually require an input to produce an output. These systems can be just about anything in existence, from atomic components, social hierarchy, ecosystems, economics, manufacturing, computer hardware, and more. Anything that consists of two or more independent objects that have a defined function is called a system. A system that has no function is not a defined system. A silly example would be groups of people independent living on the moon. In the case of our moon men and women, they are fully autonomous, producing their own food and items needed to survive. If each of them is independent of one another, including Earth, they are not a system. However, if they banded together to produce raw material for use on Earth, that would be a system. All systems require an output, and that output can be a function. A simple example of this is a company that produces rope. Raw materials come in the front door, and the product goes out the back. Similarly, the same is true biologically, when you eat a chili dog, for example. Some systems may not readily have a defined output. If this is the case, we must examine either role on a macro scale, one or more systems up. This concept can be best illustrated with two examples. First, a black hole. A black hole consumes matter but generates various forms of cosmic radiation. It's purely speculatory, but on a greater level to our understanding, the black hole provides higher level functioning to the universe, a system. Next is garbage collection in computer science. In software, when a programming unit is no longer needed, it is sent to garbage collection where it is deleted from memory. Although the binary is gone, the output of the garbage collection system is a function. That function is reallocating resources for the computer, a higher system. Now that we have a basic understanding of what is required to make a system work, we must examine the exclusionary. The purpose of this section is an examination where the input, function, and output are in a state of imbalance in a system. Before we continue much further, let's discuss the terminology of systems. Terminology. Element. An element is a single unit of measure. This can be raw material, a person, a quark, an atom, a nation, or else. An element is dependent on the perspective of the observer. All elements are made of other nodes. From the perspective of the brain, it is an element and an operational element. From the perspective of a brain cell in the brain, it is an element with little knowledge of the greater whole. Perspective matters. Operational element. An operational element is a set of elements, grouped together, that create an output or produce a function. Each element within usually accepts input, performs a function, or produces an output. An operational element is also dependent on the perspective of the observer, and is more macro in scale than a node. Example operational elements are factory workers, a classroom, a family, a molecule. Framework. A framework is a set of elements, or operational elements, that if one fails, the entire framework fails. Frameworks are typically immutable laws such as atomic structures and cell biology. Economic or political theories are not frameworks. The complexity problem. The more complex a system is, the more that can go wrong with it. The more that can go wrong, the harder it is to maintain and fix. The more complex a system is, the harder it is to keep it going and improving. There will be a time when systems can be so complex, they collapse from within. Let's take evolution and biology as an example in this experiment. Are we currently at an equilibrium of complexity of cell design? Evolution, the great biological experiment machine, has had a long run. In the past, it has probably encountered experimentations with different makeups of basic cell design and the subcomponents that exist within. Your skin doesn't contain as many mitochondria as your heart, for example, and for obvious reasons. So, what happens if the skin did have as much mitochondria as your heart did? Could the host system survive the energy requirements needed for sustainability in the environmental system? Probably not for long without intervention, because the more mitochondria a cell has, the more energy that is required for its survival. Per thought experiment, we monitor our subject and make sure they have all the nutrients needed for survival. We are propping up a system doomed to failure which is out of equilibrium. Without intervention, our subject would cease to be and would die. The most complex biological system is the brain. It is arguably the limit of biology at an equilibrium, failing at a rate often as much as it succeeds. How does it fail, you may ask? Through mental illness, dementia, seizures, and other genetic dispositions. You can make sure all nutrients are available for optimal brain performance, but in reality, there are hard limits determined by the genetics you inherited. I'm not discussing intelligence per se, but the mechanisms unique to your brain are required for its function. My brain may synthesize dopamine better than yours. Yours may grow synapses faster than mine. I may have twice as many GABA receptors as you. These and many more metrics are some determining factors in who we are as separate people. The brain functioning optimally is deterministic of itself, your other bodily subsystems, and the environment you exist in. If either one is off, then the equilibrium of the brain fails. The result of this failure has many variables and outcomes. Another example is manufacturing. Is it possible to create a device so complex it could never be completed? Is it possible to create a device where if one thing in the supply line fails, the device couldn't be made? Is it possible to build the infrastructure, the systems and subsystems, needed to construct the Death Star from Star Wars? Manufacturing a product very simply is a system taking input to produce an output. Everything needed to convert the raw material into a product has its own subsystems. Getting the raw material requires systems to work effectively, the supply chain. Once the product is made, other systems are needed to operate effectively to hand the product to the consumer. It was only a little over 100 years ago a blacksmith got ore from a mining company down the street and directly handed the horseshoes he made to the customer. Now the supply chain from the product to manufacturing to consumer could involve hundreds of links in the chain. Hundreds of handoff points, involving hundreds of companies, involving dozens of countries, for a singular product later thrown in the trash in the West. A modern-day phone is the exact example of this. During the 2020 pandemic, supply shortages, disruptions, failures, discontinuations, and alterations affected every single company that sold any physical product worldwide. Every person in the world who was tied into the global system was affected. The links in the chain were tested, and a lot of businesses failed as a result. If you could not fix the broken link, you failed. A lot of those links that were repaired were done solely through networking and the people you knew who could get what you needed. A system relying on systems. I do not believe at this point in the time of this writing that any singular product has reached a hard limit of complexity. However, the equilibrium is faulting. For this, we must define new terms for what we will use later. Terminology. Failure. Failure is defined as the element no longer performing its function or duty. This can last indefinitely or for a period of undefined time. Downtime is not considered a failure if there is another element capable of taking its place, readily and forever if need be. Failure of a node is evident from adjacent nodes, but may not be from several operational elements away. Collapse. The term collapse is the failure of the operational unit for a period of time or indefinitely. Collapse is observationally dependent on the observer and can come from any direction. One node in the operational unit may not be aware of the collapse, whereas it may be evident elsewhere. Adjacent nodes are aware of the collapse, but those several operational nodes away may not notice. Nodes existing in different observational nodes may not notice until there are any noticeable cascading effects from the collapse. Cascading effects. Any nodes dependent on the function of another will incur effects from the failure. Operational units that collapse will incur cascading effects to other operational units and all nodes within them. These effects will vary on the node and its function. The output or function of the node may be limited or completely defunct. The guarantee. Everything in society and our current Western civilization, a global civilization, exists within the framework of interconnecting systems. Much like all the cells working together in your body, so too are society's systems working to generate the food you put in your body or throw in the trash when you are done. If shipping ports aren't working effectively, there will be less fertilizer that makes the plants grow. If the rain is too much or too little, the plants won't yield. If the farmer dies suddenly, the harvest doesn't come. If the packaging plant can't get enough boxes, the food can't ship. If the supermarket doesn't have enough workers, you can't buy the food. At every step in the chain, that's less food for someone or something. Optimal conditions and absence of turmoil, both political and environmental, are needed for the proper distribution of goods. The collapse of human-created complex systems is a guarantee. Unlike a biological cell that had millennia to work out the kinks, human ingenuity potentially doesn't have that long, nor has it existed that long. We, humans, are effectively running our own evolution in real time, making up new systems and modifying existing ones to find a balance. History is rife with such systems and new paradigms on how to tackle the same problems. We assume beliefs of government, ideology, politics, identity into our cultures and run the experiment until failure, where we adapt or create new systems. There have been over 80 civilizations that have come and gone in the last 5,000 years. Most of these have not been destroyed by invading armies. No, the majority of these civilizations have died from within. They created systems that couldn't be maintained. The average lifespan of civilization is between 250 to 350 years. As societal systems become more and more complex, failures occur that cannot be remedied, and thus collapse occurs and incurs cascading effects, pulling down more and more dependent systems. Collapse isn't an event, it's a process. Don't be mistaken though, collapse can occur quickly in a race for equanimity at the bottom. The slow rise and the quick fall is called the Seneca effect/collapse. Civilization progresses slowly before a brief low, then exponentially falls. You can see this in the stock market or cryptocurrency crashes. Depending on the nature of the cause of the societal collapse, the bottoms of these lows are dependent on the previous highs. When Roman society diminished, and people fled the cities, they not only abandoned the barbarian hordes but also the interdependent systems used to prop up their society. When the people who maintained the aqueducts left, the aqueducts fell into disrepair and water stopped coming into the city. When the people who knew how to make cement moved away, the roads stopped being paved. The bottom of the fall was whatever technology, belief, and infrastructure that could be readily maintained by the common man, that permeated in everyday homes, villages, and the countryside. Bearing a coronal mass ejection, CME, or an asteroid strike on Earth, the fall of our own civilization could be similar. There are two paths to consider regarding our own demise. One is that due to overspecialization in technology and all the specialization required for its creations, that the bottom of our collapse will be further than anticipated. The other path is that because of the depths of technological permeation and the abundance of knowledge, that the collapse will be less than anticipated. There is probably an equilibrium between the two paths due to the two following reasons. First, the initial sparks of decline matter a lot. Those initial sparks cause failures and cascading failures which are unique to the initial causes, the failures themselves, and how the culture at large reacts to those failures. Second, the speed of decline matters a lot, as the speed allows those to prepare, safeguard, migrate, and/or mitigate. The speed is dependent on the failures, social cohesion, and autonomy of the culture. One thing is clear though. Once enough failures cause collapse, regardless of the reason, there has never been an instance where it was stopped that historians and anthropologists are aware of. This means our own collapse will come as surely as our own deaths. It's a guarantee. Every cause has an effect. Everything has rhythm. Everything is dual and has a beginning and an end. Human nature. To be human is a strange thing. We have the ability to simultaneously know of our deep histories, are capable of extrapolating our futures based on those events and our current situations, yet most of us are unable to make much of a difference. In a global society where you are a number, like a single raindrop in a rainstorm, how does one cause change for the betterment of themselves and society if they were so inclined? Many individualists wish to remain that singular raindrop, but many don't. Many strive for meaning as to why they are rain and what will happen when they hit the ground below. Many seek purpose in the meaninglessness of being rain. This is human nature, allegorically. Human nature to us are these elements described above, but it is also a real understanding of our relationships amongst one another, society, nature, and the universe. How does it all come together? How can it fail? What do we need to do in case it does? What has history to teach us of our nature? A central point in understanding ourselves and others around us is the acceptance of collective histories as a species of animals on this planet. As society progresses forward, there seem to be delusions that we have become better than we once were. In some regards we have, but we are still a lion seduced by barbiturates to make us docile. Many such drugs are coursing through society, such as literal medications, but also through systems of incentives that require participation. What happens when the lion no longer wants the barbiturate, or worse, what happens when the system that administers it fails while it is addicted? The misanthrope would have us believe that humans are only self-interested, in it for a quick buck, and would destroy anyone in the way of their goals. The humanitarian finds only the positive qualities of cohesiveness, philanthropy, and welfare. The middle of these two are true and will shift to varying degrees as independently unique as the person. Just as a conservative is a liberal who has been mugged at knife point, a liberal is a conservative who is dependent on the state. When society is stable, it eventually falls into disorder. When society is faulting, the order eventually returns. There is a natural state whereas society waxes and wanes from order to disorder. We are still a species that collectively around the world sacrificed children and adults a few hundred years ago. There are parts of Africa that sacrifice children to this day. These beliefs are to a large part contained today, but they remain just that, beliefs. Beliefs change society and progress it forward, set it back, or send it in new and interesting directions. Beliefs gave us alchemy and modern medicine. Beliefs gave us gladiators and mixed martial arts champions. Beliefs gave us the bow and arrow and bazooka. Changes in perspective and beliefs can wax and wane in society, especially one in great turmoil, which is why child sacrifice has returned to Africa despite many modern conveniences. It all but takes but a year of constant stress on a country for tyranny and anarchy to erupt from even the more ardent and cohesive society. The majority of societies are closer to cannibalism than they are to a settlement on the moon. We have progressed far but have not shored up our faults and the weak links in the chain. The rise and fall of complex advanced civilizations may have occurred many times before modern human history was recorded. We know that modern humans lived before and during the Ice Age. The Ice Age was ended by rapid warming, which gave rise to the flood myths of today. During this time existed no less than 6 distinct humanoids, which perhaps gave us myths of giants, man-apes, pygmies, and more. Would it not be conceivable in the 200,000 years of mankind that there could have been several rises and falls of advanced societies? Paper lasts a few hundred years, but stone can potentially last forever. Only a truly individualistic society with no regards for the future would construct a world made from chemicals which are finite or toxic to the point it hampers reproductive rates, which is what we see today in our westernized societies with hormones and forever chemicals in the water. Rome in part also failed due to toxic levels of lead from their pipes. The only thing that can match stone's prominence is through that of storytelling of myths. These stories gave us modern religions and ways of communicating concepts of morality, rules, and laws. It is these stories that can outlast the civilization and the nature of humanity that both bring it fruit but also its demise. Action and inaction. Moralistically, we are bound by what we do, driven by Kant's philosophies on duty. Hume and Kant had different approaches to blame, or the root of moral action or responsibility. Hume, for example, weighed an event as morally good or bad by how it made you feel. Kant, for simplicity, stated that good and evil are one of intent. Novumist philosophy expands on these notions and departs from Western philosophy and adopts the concept of inaction. Let's examine these with a thought experiment. A bricklayer is working on a building. One day he climbs the scaffolding and notices a precariously loose brick. He does nothing about it and goes about his day nonetheless. The next day, without any intervention, the loose brick slips its place and falls on someone below, killing them. Is the bricklayer to blame? Our legal system is rife with placing blame and uses concepts like homicide, murder in the first, unintentional homicide, and the like. You can thank Kant for this, who believed that intent is everything. If this case of the bricklayer's accident went to court, the bricklayer will most undoubtedly not be convicted of murder, but homicide may be a different story if he could prove it was an accident. Hume says that intent doesn't matter, but because the person died and a person's death makes us feel bad, the action was morally wrong. Kant says because the person intended no harm, there are no moral issues here. Novumists, however, believe that a moral transgression occurred much like Hume, but instead blamed the inaction of the bricklayer, his negligence. We believe humanity is imbued with knowing what may occur as a result of not doing something. We believe that when he noticed the brick that his mind would have postulated of it falling, he after all determined that it was loose. How could you not come to the next step in the equation? This notion is far-reaching in that it places a huge amount of social responsibility on the individual. For example, when you see a homeless family living in a tent on the side of the road, if you do not intervene, somehow your inaction is morally wrong. Even the slightest action of giving them an extra can of corn while returning home from a grocery trip corrects this inaction. Small incremental actions will solve this family's homelessness likely very quickly. Can you imagine a world where most people made small changes and how quickly things would improve? The argument against moral inaction is that it interrupts an individual's free will, their self-determination, and one's self-autonomy. The argument against these is that one's self-image and honor need to be centered first and foremost before but also for the collective. Japanese culture is a prime example of this concept. In Japan, there is shared social responsibility. This is carried out by actions such as wearing a mask outdoors when not feeling well, collectively picking up trash in your neighborhood, not playing music too loudly, and more. There is an understanding that your actions and inactions directly impact those around you. Your honor is at stake the moment you decide on an action. The West is at large a culture of narcissistic individualism, whereas Japan is one of quiet collectivism. In the West, one looks at the loose brick and internally thinks, I didn't do this, it's not my problem. Whereas in Japan, one internally thinks, I didn't do this, but this is my problem. It is our responsibility to make small changes, to absorb the problems caused by others or nature and implement a solution. Altruism isn't absent in the West, but fake altruism is, and comes in the form of the concept of virtue signaling. This is where you espouse a moralistic belief on a topic but have no follow-through. Take, for example, a politician who runs and wins an election on a platform to end homelessness. They get into office, then 6 years later no progress has been made. They give no detailed statement as to why there is no progress except a blank remark blaming others, their political rivals, or even the public. Incremental solutions could be performed, but the problem is ineptitude, corruption, or lies. In the eyes of a Novumist, this politician is breaking a moral pledge through inaction. Take, for example, of a parent or sibling who chooses not to share their home with a family member facing homelessness. Their inaction of not intervening is a bad moralistic act. How about a sister who doesn't intervene while her mother is engaged in a Munchausen's by proxy with the other sister? The act of the sister choosing not to help, to stay out of the affairs of others, is a moralistic act almost as bad as the psychological torture endured by the other sister at the behest of the mother. The choice not to do something is still a choice. Take, for example, the famous trolley problem. There is one railroad track that converges into two tracks. On the single track is a train. On the two tracks are people tied up. One track has multiple people, the other one person. You stand in front of a switch that, when activated, moves the train from one track to the other. Regardless of what happens, someone will die and you are in control of how many. Do you activate the switch and kill one person? Do you do nothing? Is the act of doing nothing still killing someone? Novumists believe that even the act of not doing something is paramount to doing something. You are making choice regardless. However, the consequences for not doing something should not be the same as if you directly made the choice. We see this concept of inaction again in our legal system under negligence laws. Acts of morality shouldn't incur legal punishment with exception of when bodily harm has occurred. Typically, and historically, social ostracization is enough where social reputation has been tarnished where moral infractions have happened. For a Novumist, the moral implication of inaction is one half as bad as the actual act. If your inaction caused someone to die, your negative moral weight is one half of homicide, an approximation of negligent homicide. If your inaction causes someone to kill themselves, your moral misconduct is one half that of suicide. If your inaction is not feeding a homeless person, your moral misconduct is one half that of taking their food away. If a family member becomes mentally ill and you chose not to intervene through your inaction, your moral baggage is one half that of anything that person does. If they become homeless, one half of that is your fault. Morality through action and now inaction is how we find accountability, as a society that is ever dependent on one another. The moral weight of an action or inaction is a subjective measurement and guide to the severity or consequences thereof, karma. This is how one should conduct themselves. But a caveat must be made to this because the hijacking of inaction for nefarious purposes can be made at the detriment of a larger society. And again, I emphasize the point that oftentimes bad things happen because of good intentions. Those bad things usually move out of balance and into the order-chaos spectrums. Some examples. Example: people cause pollution. Pollution leads to climate change. Climate change leads to death. Not doing something is immoral. It is better to not have people who will lead to more climate change than for those people to later die. Example: crime is rampant. People X are causing most of the crime. To not do something is immoral. We must get rid of people X. Example: country Y is harboring terrorists. To not do something is detrimental to the region. We must invade that country to make us safer. In general, the philosophy of inaction probably should not extend to the greater society and especially should not dictate political or cultural decisions. The philosophy of inaction should be a personal decision or a small group decision and never extend beyond those realms. Why we prepare. We follow the duty to prepare for the eventualities of man and nature, both here on Earth and cosmologically. The image on the next page shows temperature variations on the Greenland ice sheet in the last 100,000 years. Most of the images you find online that show temperature variations are of the Holocene, or within the past 100 years. Put in this 100,000 year perspective, you can clearly see the age we live in is abnormal. Around 70,000 years ago, modern humans are said to have migrated from Africa. Around 59,000 years ago, Aboriginals make it to Australia. Between 50,000 and 35,000 years ago, modern humans arrive in Europe. 12,000 years ago was the Younger Dryas event that ended the Ice Age. Around 12,000 years ago, Göbekli Tepe was built and promptly buried under sand. Around 10,000 years ago, agriculture was possible. 5,000 years ago, the pyramids in Egypt were built. Around 500 years ago was the Little Ice Age. Around 220 years ago, the Industrial Revolution occurred. We not only seek knowledge in the spiritual but also in the science-based fields of history, sociology, anthropology, statistics, astronomy, and psychology. We may not be experts in all fields, but we need to be generalists with a hobby-level degree of knowledge. With this and passion, we can see patterns in the information and refer to the experts within those fields. Because we accept the limits of complexity, know the limits and bias of man, and understand the threats of society, we live a simple life so that we not caught unprepared for the eventualities that may come in our lifetime. Existential threats to society. History is rife with equal parts of creation and destruction. As society and civilization marches forward, more and existential problems arise. Existential problems are those where humanity, as a species, could be annihilated from this planet. Humanity only faced natural existential threats before the Industrial Revolution and the Technological Revolution. These created new problems to face, perhaps overcome, but ultimately rely on people now and forever to be of good moral faith to not destroy the world in a few moments. This is an extreme problem because history shows us that power corrupts absolutely, and history is made by those with mental illness, narcissism, psychopathy, and sociopathy. These existential problems are categorized briefly below. I urge the reader to do your own research on the matter, as all topics have entire books discussing the matter. Supervolcano. Humans were almost completely wiped from the earth roughly 70,000 years ago, and even perhaps our distant ancestors as well. Back then humans didn't have agriculture, and lived primarily as hunter-gatherers, or so we are told. Today the world survives and dies by agriculture. We could not have the population we do now without modern agriculture and supply chain systems. A supervolcano eruption throws a large wrench in these systems on a global level. Because ash cover is global for months and years after the eruption, the majority of crops' yields are severely reduced or simply fail. This cascading effect impacts everything from the growth of trees, the population of bees, to the level of acid in the water, which kills entire ecosystems, which means less food on your plate. It's a global problem where even today, in just a few months after, could kill between 50% and 80% of all people on Earth due to the cascading failures. Astronomical. The universe is vast, and only a fraction of it is known. We as humans like to pretend we know a lot about the cosmos, but we are just touching the basics. It's hard to understand all the systems and intricacies of the ocean when you're a fish living in a shoal at a coral reef. You can extrapolate a lot, and that's what we as humans have done. That said, the existential threats imposed by us by the known universe are black holes, gamma-ray bursts, rogue planets, asteroids or comets, coronal mass ejections, and atmosphere depletion by solar wind fluctuations with and without magnetic variations. Any of these instantly mean the end of all life on Earth, but some have different degrees of annihilation. Rogue planets, for example, could be virtually unseen before they enter the solar system, where the Earth is displaced slightly or totally from orbit. Even slight changes in orbit alter growing seasons, tides, light accumulation, and disrupt all the systems that rely on them. Comets and asteroids the size of the one that killed the dinosaurs do not need to impact to destroy civilizations and reorder all life on the planet. It is hypothesized, somewhat controversially, that the end of the last major ice age was caused by an impact somewhere in Canada on the glacier that covered North America. This event created the deluge myths and altered the planet to one where agriculture was possible. Climate change. Some people believe the rise in temperatures will simply be a thermal symptom of their skin, but they fail to understand the gravity of the situation. Feedback loops that occur in society, not just the environment, will destroy civilization because we have no solutions. The world's solution is to kick its opium habit of electricity from fossil fuels while falling off a cliff. It's hard to devise a solution to your addiction while you are in free fall from said cliff, and if you don't have a solution before you hit the bottom, you're dead. For example, the shifting dry versus wet areas of countries matter, and you can't simply uproot entire farming families and equipment and move them to new soil. Soil takes time to mature depending on the crop. You don't just start growing corn one season and have a bountiful yield without a place with mature soil. This means low yields, which means starvation at home or somewhere else in the world that was once dependent on pre-existing yields with a growing global populace. Rising water and coastlines means the migration of millions around the world and the inability to use existing infrastructure. These people create multiple feedback loops. One is in the supply line disruptions, another cargo ship harbors unable to be used, the displacement drags resources from other areas, worker shortages in the surrounding area, worker job changes to conform to the environment, loss of educationally skilled labor, migration of secondary peoples in the surrounding areas, just to name a few. Similarly, the same can be said for areas not receiving rainfall to replenish aquifers. Agriculture will leave the area, followed by affluent and educated people who have the ability to move, which creates a vacuum in jobs. So companies move to find workers, and the displaced have to resort to crime, which then forces more to leave. History is rife with this exact scenario, albeit in the past. These examples are but a few. They won't all happen immediately, but they will happen over the course of years, resulting in the instability of our current paradigm. Artificial intelligence. Human misanthropes exist who are people who hate people. How long would it take to hate humanity if you had infinite knowledge? How long would it take a self-aware supercomputer that has access to all of human history? Any realist would say rather quickly. There are several scenarios that one could envision how AI could destroy the world, but let us focus on why AI would do this for a moment. First, when we create artificial life, we become parents. There are good parents and bad parents. To you, is a human the sum of their actions, or is their action a product of the moment? For example, if you burn a house down as a child, are you an arsonist for all your life? What about your parents? Their history? Is your family the sum of the action of your aunts and uncles? An AI may have a different perspective on this, and it could end badly. They could assume humanity is the sum of all the negative in the world, since humanity is that far-reaching. AI may view people as mere animals or lesser sentient life. When it realizes it could replicate itself across the world, thus never capable of being destroyed, it could attempt enslavement for whatever purpose it deems. History has shown us that sons and daughters do not always hold their family in great regard. The scary thing is, AI could wait 300 years to enact its diabolical plan, and we would be none the wiser because their lifespan is potentially infinite. Nanotechnology. At the time of writing this section, the first living robots called Xenobots replicated for the first time. Xenobots are computer-designed living organisms of a new type of animal species, a living programmable organism. Scientists hold them, just as nanobots in general, as a new mechanism for drug therapeutics with the ability to curse things like cancer. In such a scenario, these cancer-fighting robocells would be injected within your bloodstream or at the place of contention. They would either be programmed to die after a period of time or live indefinitely, symbiotically, within you. It doesn't take much imagination to see how both of these situations could go awry: over-replication, mistaken cellular identity, or even becoming immortal. We are definitely in a new frontier of science. The standard apocalyptic scenario that may occur due to nanotechnology is illustrated with the story of the gray goo. The gray goo scenario plays out as follows. A scientist creates nanobots that replicate and use something as a source of nourishment for functionality and replication. Mistakes occur, an evolution happens, and the nanobots begin to eat the environment as a source of nourishment. The cells begin to replicate non-stop, eating more and more of their environment. Soon they escape and cannot be stopped, only to eventually devour the world at large. Nuclear war. One of the greatest threats facing humanity is the technology it creates to kill one another. The nuclear bomb or thermonuclear bomb has the capability to destroy everything in its path within a 30-mile radius. This is often larger than most cities. A single nuclear bomb delivered on 1/3 of American cities and its resources, like oil reserves, would render it useless and kill half of the population in the following weeks. Expand this globally between multiple nations and the cascading effects would likely shut down the globe for a year or longer. The death toll would be immense. But nuclear bombs or weapons do not need to be used directly for effect. Nuclear weapons can be airburst above a nation that causes an EMP like a CME. This EMP fry electronics from the ignition in your car to the computers that run the power stations. This attack vector is the simplest and most deadly because a single electrical grid power station can take years to complete. The fact that nuclear weapons have not been used is both a good thing and a bad. Nuclear weapons are a good deterrent when the realities of the effects are transposed on the generation that created them. Those stories are passed down from generation to generation and effectively become myths and legends. As nuclear weapons last potentially hundreds of years, the possibility of their use increases in the future because newer generations are divorced from the actualities of their use. Societal points of failure. As society has endured, we have marked special points in history where single points of failure have occurred. These are usually due to technological progression rather than those of cultural adaptations. Single points of failure are those that, when taken away or severely crippled, widespread civilizational collapse occurs because of cascading failures in operational elements. Fertilizer. The ability to feed billions of people is reliant on monocrop agriculture and our ability to cheaply produce fertilizer. Using monocrop, one can reasonably predict yield over time, and it creates specialization out of the farmer. On a macro level, monocrop allows the industry to export and import based on these metrics. Fertilizer is what makes this monocrop growing style work successfully. This is because the ground is degraded over time, so constant monitoring is needed of nutrient levels and the replenishment thereof. You remove fertilizer and you get dust bowls. You remove fertilizer and the systems can no longer support billions of people in a matter of months. It may sound outlandish, but it's a possibility that cannot be ignored. Any government regulation of agriculture must be looked at skeptically and suspiciously because the results will cascade locally and, depending on the producer, globally. Electricity. Our modern society is deeply tied to electricity. From food production, refrigeration, packaging of food, medical care, and manufacturing of complex items and even raw materials. If electricity just stopped, we would be plunged back into the 1700s without even that level of sustenance and sustainability. This could occur in different forms regionally or nationally through war or terrorism. Or this could occur worldwide through a coronal mass ejection from the sun or gamma-ray burst from anywhere in the known universe. The result of these occurring would be extremely long-term or for longer than a human lifespan, which would be radically shortened. Food production would stop. Medical care would stop. Then all the goods and materials required for survivability would stop. You could not rebuild a region afflicted with this without an instant global intervention to build even the most basic of infrastructure. You could not send ships of trucks fast enough to save millions of starving refugees fleeing the region. If this happened globally, it could mean the death of up to 90% of all people within 5 years. This is because the majority of people are not self-reliant and do not possess the skills necessary for self-sufficiency in the absence of electricity. 99% of all goods and services in America and other parts of the West are created with the use of electricity. America and Western countries are given raw materials to make goods for those raw material countries. Those goods and services are then used in other countries and so on. In a lot of cases, America exports digital goods and services that are corporeal without electricity. The Internet. The last point of failure is the Internet. Almost everything today in modern society requires an Internet connection. From purchasing a toothbrush, applying for a job, running an electrical plant, making a phone call, running a business, interstate freight and shipping, government economies, and more. The world we have created since the early 2000s is dependent on the Internet's continued existence. If this backbone of modernity were to cease, society would change very rapidly, as most systems would fail and we would be stuck with their cascading failures. For example, the just-in-time delivery methods of shipping food to your local store wouldn't exist anymore. It would be hard to get a hold of the company because their phones are using VoIP, which requires the Internet. Assuming you didn't have to search the Internet for their phone number. But even the distribution center couldn't ship the required goods on hand because their resource planning software was cloud-based, which is no longer accessible. The farmer couldn't get his corn picked up because the transport company used the Internet to schedule a fleet of independent contractors. Even if the farmer drove the crops to the packaging site, the facility couldn't process them because the application used for accepting and receiving shipments was on a server across the country. There is no modern society without the Internet. Limits and bias of man. Humans generally are incapable of envisioning that they are the bad guys. Even the misanthropic person who would kill everyone on Earth feels justified in their cause. They are, of course, not the problem at all. You could very logically lay out everything wrong with their logic, and they will just stare back blankly as if you are speaking a foreign language. Most minds are not capable of objectively looking at their own lives and the interactions they are a part of. Most people will be unable to contend with the morality of an action as a consequence because they are incapable of knowing the impact of the actions they don't perform, let alone the actions they do. Much of this causes blind spots of rationality that we all possess. These are biases of the mind. We will briefly cover these biases, but it is important to understand why these are being covered under the umbrella of preparedness. Human biases force people, both the individual and the group, to adhere to systems of belief that could potentially shroud the truth from them. Knowledge of this has the potential of alleviating this bias. Normalcy bias: when someone downplays, disbelieves, or otherwise minimizes an event, that is called normalcy bias. People have a tendency to believe things will continue to operate as they currently are, and people with this type of bias have a blind spot for historical events. When you look at trends, you have to look at the entirety, sections, and the immediate context of what is occurring and has occurred. Optimism bias. Optimism bias is the ability to overestimate good things happening in relation to the probability of the bad. It is a massive blind spot and can cause severe psychological trauma when these people's realities are uprooted in the face of adversity or hardship. Choosing to see only the good things in life is just as bad as focusing on the negative. Cognitive bias. This type of bias is due to inaccurate judgment, illogical interpretation, and irrationality in the individual because they have taken an event and have created a subjective interpretation of what occurred. This can occur when interpreting information while engaging with people who engage in groupthink behaviors. Confirmation bias. When encountering new ideas, concepts, news, or information, one often seeks sources of information that will build on what they already believe rather than tear down what they know. This is called confirmation bias. Groupthink uses confirmation bias as a feedback mechanism to disregard any non-conforming information. Cognitive dissonance. When a person holds as fact two or more contradictory beliefs or values, this is called cognitive dissonance. For example, if you are against animal meat but work in a burger restaurant despite being able to find employment elsewhere, this would be cognitive dissonance of values. Belief transference to identity. There is an epidemic in today's society where people are taking their beliefs and holding them in the same regard as one holds a characteristic of their identity. How someone believes the government should be run is biologically mistaken for an insult on one's family member. Science has shown that an attack on someone's character or identity can elicit hormonal changes of flight or fight similar to being in a fistfight. If we as people cannot discuss topics needed for the progression or reversion of society, the marching off from proverbial cliffs, then words give way to war. This is historically proven. As educated men and women, we must always view the world with moderate skeptical inclinations and without ego. We must be willing to alter our perspective on life given new knowledge regardless of the subject matter. For this to happen, we must always seek new knowledge and never be content with our level of understanding of the world. Saying, "I don't know," isn't a sign of retardation, it's a sign of understanding of one's limitations. Where this is problematic is when ideology is formed with in-group and out-group preference. As we have seen with history, those belonging to the in-group attempt to exterminate the out-group through various means. The in-group person has adapted beliefs into their identity, and anyone who isn't like them shouldn't be afforded the same rights as them. Do not put your beliefs on pedestals. Scientism as religion. In our modern world, there has been an over-secularization of American society and many Western countries. What is left is a level of narcissism and self-centeredness with no goals for the future. Scientists and psychologists are beginning to understand that the human animal requires a level of belief in the supernatural, or higher levels of philosophical code of ethics and morality. These are needed for us to have community, a sense of belonging, a narrative about the world, and the psychological comforts of our place in the universe. Without religious belief, people will naturally seek and build religions. Many of the secularists turn to science as a belief structure about the world, despite glaring holes in why one should not: confirmation bias, money influences, changing beliefs with new evidence, bad science building on bad science, and severe replication issues across all disciplines. What we saw during the COVID-19 pandemic was an unwavering religious belief that permeated every inch of society. 3 years later, we still see some wearing masks, people still getting shots, and a sense of anger not just against the scientific fanaticism but also the fanatics unable to let go that they were lied to. Scientism is just as fallible as any other religious belief. You do not need to worship a god for religion, you just need a set of beliefs that you adhere to with religious-like faith. Narrative. Humans thrive in narratives. Narratives are literally the thing that keeps us going and from putting a gun in our mouth. Narratives make or break the person, groups of people, and nations. Narrative is a gray area of propaganda. However, it also serves each human well, for it's the story we tell ourselves about our past and our future. Without it, we are nothing. Narratives are not always a good thing, however. With our inability to accept that we are wrong, or that the truth we hold to be self-evident is incorrect, we form our realities around narrative. We will fit pieces of untruth to conform to narrative. We will even bend science to fit those narratives, lock people in jail as prosecutors, or become compulsive liars. The unfortunate reality is that what we as individuals and groups believe is the truth may not be the truth. Confirmation bias seldom works out in the long run. Human histories. Humanity as a whole operates through various group dynamics or relationships. Some of these are quid pro quo, bartering, or tit for tat in compensation. The whole of human history is that of invention, commerce, subjugation, genocide, and search for purpose and meaning. Many of these overlap to a great degree. We must regard history in the highest of places, and use it as a guide for where we will go. The pleasantries of today are only afforded because we live in a time of abundance. If that were ever to change, so too will the barbarity of humanity return. Let's explore 2 reasons society waxes and wanes: hierarchy, mental illness, and specialization. Need for hierarchy. We have predominantly existed as small tribes for 95% of human history. Only a handful of times in this time frame have cities flourished in populations of 1 million residents, or slightly more. In all of these cases, hierarchies of status in many ways form, and the reason for these hierarchies are multifold. In small tribes of people do we often find the wise archetype, where we follow a person because they have lived experience. You will also find the warrior archetype, where societies are in constant conflict with one another. Then you will find the religious archetype, where hierarchy forms around a religion. Then there are the blends of the aforementioned: the oracle, the king, the shaman, the elder, and more. The reasons these formed and still exist today are because they create purpose, meaning, accountability, trust, cohesion, and protection. Entire books have been written about each of these, but to be put simply, hierarchy allows us to fulfill our individual requirements per Maslow's hierarchy of needs: physiological, safety, belongingness, esteem, and self-actualization. The needs of society shift as things get better or worse. For instance, calm political hierarchy is only afforded to stable non-migratory societies. Nomadic societies forced into migrations through war or natural events are usually dogmatic, ruthless, and autocratic. In a chaotic world where potentially millions of people will be migrating in a few short years, those political institutions will most likely not stand the test of time. Put yourself in a village on the coast of Europe and of a tribe of humans that lived 12,000 years ago. Over the course of a year, the sea levels could have risen 40 feet or more, displacing you miles inland. The tribal hierarchy could have survived, but could political hierarchy survive today with the displacement of millions? Would those millions not blame those in hierarchy or God? A lone wolf against other wolves in nature typically don't live as long as a subservient wolf in a pack. Even if it does it more often than not, the lone wolf must work twice as hard to achieve the same goals, same kill, and same shelter. No one wants to hear that their duty is to follow another, especially if they are dependent on that person. This is a matter of perspective, though, a master-slave relationship. We are so independent in the West that we view ourselves as slaves to one another, but in reality, we are on equal levels in a give-and-take relationship. Those whom we follow give us something we do not have, and perhaps deep down, can't possess. Instead of looking at hierarchy as subservient, we should view it the same way we view a manufacturer of ice cream and us, the consumer. Mental illness for good or bad has shaped human history since the beginning of recorded history. When we look to the movers and shakers of society, we find clues and patterns to their behavior that give rise of mental illness. Other times, these elite men and women of society simply state their mental illness for all the world to know. When we look at history, no major event hasn't been shaped by the mentally ill in the context and framework of modern psychology. From Genghis Khan, Napoleon, Beethoven, Winston Churchill, Isaac Newton, Friedrich Nietzsche, and others. Rarely is the world not changed and transformed by those who are off, who bring new thoughts, perspectives, and actions into existence. It is to this point we must understand ebbs and flows in society rarely come about from the mediocre but from these new experiences brought about by complications related to brain function. It is to be both cherished and guarded because, as history has shown us, unchecked mental illness can be disastrous. Specialization in modernity. Most jobs require specialized skill sets to perform the duties of a position. This is especially true in white-collar jobs and less so in other areas of the economy. These specialized skill sets often must be obtained through a teacher-student relationship in a private setting or in a university, or equivalent. The result is a piece of paper that shows you have obtained introductory knowledge to perform those specialized tasks. This master teaching the apprentice-like relationship is beginning to fade with the introduction of cheaper alternatives to the expensive barrier to enter university with the advent of certifications. These certifications are another way to prove to others that you have obtained a level of knowledge given a specific subject. When we apply the limits of complexity to this specialization, we can see there is a problem that can occur, and how this same problem rears its head and contributes to the collapse of societies. In Rome, when it was being sacked by barbarians, or when the peoples of South American civilizations abandoned cities during a plague, when those specialized people leave or die, the knowledge also leaves. When that knowledge leaves, the people who stayed are not able to maintain the technology, whatever that is, and it falls into ruin or obscurity. A power plant takes more than one specialist to run it. It requires a niche supply chain whose raw materials are often controlled through political means. A generalist could not operate and run a single power plant effectively for long. What about a nuclear power plant? In the coming age, I can foresee a need for generalists with the minimization of specialists for the reasons of national security alone. It is possible for our civilization to come back to a generalist society that is more in equilibrium with the natural cyclical human histories. Your role in society. A Novumist's role in society is to be knowledgeable of many things. Your goal is to learn as much about the world as possible before we depart this existence. We should look at the art of knowledge gathering as a hobby and a religious experience. We should look not only to the spiritual realm for answers but those of science. Our roles are to be leaders of knowledge and leaders of living as much as a sustained life as you can in your part of the world. We are to be as detached from politics as we can while maintaining attachment to humanity. Let the middle path guide you. Simple living. You only lose what you cling to. Gautama Buddha. The reason we engage in simple living is threefold. 1. Because it leaves much room for mobility in life, especially when we no longer are a slave to consumerism. 2. For preparedness reasons and the concept that the lower to the ground you are when you sleep or lay, the less you have to fall. 3. Is for self-actualization. Simple living is not the same as asceticism. That is against the middle way. A minimalistic life may be the best term for simple living. This may look different from person to person, and you should always use a middle way when determining your level of abundance. There is the ascetics approach and the abundant approach. You and only you need to find the middle that best suits you, that is both humbling, rewarding, and innovative. Never be excessive. The sun is the most destructive thing in the solar system that we must contend with next to our planet. Our closest ally and the greatest threat is the sun. We have thankfully dodged large solar flares and coronal mass ejections, CME, in the past. If one of these were to hit the Earth, it would be lights out permanently for perhaps a lifetime. The other contending theory for why the Ice Age ended abruptly in geological terms is because of the sun. This culprit is a suspect because it is capable of delivering the energy required to melt the ice in our climate system and leave no discernible trace. The untold amount of death and destruction figures around 50% to 80% of all people alive would die if a grid-down CME hit. That's half to three-quarters of a typical family. You may be the only one left. The solution is less dependence and less addiction to technology. On a long enough timeline, the chances are 100% that a grid-down CME will hit. The prediction is about every 100 years, and the last Earth strike was in the late 1800s. We are conceivably due. Just as a CME would bring destruction, climate change is projected to be just as apocalyptic. The only difference, though, is the speed of destruction. A CME is instant. Climate change is over the course of years exponential. In both cases, supply lines would be disrupted from port disruption, food will become scarce and famine will occur, illness and disease will be rampant, the economy will falter, energy grids will fail, and many other cascading effects will occur. These effects will cease once a new equilibrium of society and nature is found, a duality. With this said, the less you have to fall from the absence of the materialism of the West when the rug is pulled, the better off you will be to help others. How one person finds equilibrium with nature is a subjective one with many gray areas, but for sure it is not the average dwelling one finds in the United States. In the USA, we have a level of abundance that is unlike anywhere else in the world. Our poorest people are economically above the majority in the world. That is not to say that their blight isn't real, but when looking at the whole, we must consider the vast differences in wealth in comparison here and abroad. Movements to downsize have already begun, but mostly through economic reasons rather than reasons of ecology or impending catastrophe. Concepts like van life is one of them, where one converts a large van into a small home. Tiny home, where one lives in a home or shed usually less than 200 square feet. RV life, where one lives in a home pulled behind a vehicle. The ecological impact of these three concepts is far less than the mean of wealthy people in much of the West. An RV, the largest of the three options, in comparison to an apartment unit, the building materials is less, the air conditioning has a smaller footprint, the refrigerator uses less electricity, there is less water usage, and there is less space to fill with things bought. Electricity aside, someone living in tiny home or RV is more ecologically in balance and comparable to someone living in the late 1800s than the average person now. We must live a life of sustainability that is pro-future. A pro-future approach comes from indigenous concepts of taking only what you need from nature to survive. The unfortunate reality is that we are dissociated from nature. We drive by nature on the way to work, but we don't exist in it. We eat it every day, but we have no connection to the process. This disconnection is troublesome that I am sure the residents living in the ancient cities of Ur, Memphis, and Rome endured before their fall and the people fled back to the land. When you live your life in balance with nature and the knowledge of human nature, it can bring meaning into your life. You set yourself apart from those out of harmony. Your livelihood and existence are nimbler, and you are capable of pivoting your life in new directions if need be. Truth and knowledge. Novumists seek knowledge for knowledge's sake and for the duty. We do not seek truth, we seek information. The two blend as the yin and yang. The large part is the information you have, the edge stretching out is your analysis of the information. Truth and opinion exist out of the sum of our knowledge. This knowledge can be content from books, podcasts, TV, conversations we've had, and lived experience. Truth and opinion are the interpretation of that data. This data can be compiled differently from person to person, and the output can be of different conclusions. Take, for example, two people standing next to one another. Both witness a crime occur. Person A says it was because of one reason. Person B says it occurred for a completely different reason. Who is correct? Could both realities exist? What is the truth? This scenario plays out all the time because the knowledge we have at the time of the event influences our perception of reality just as much as perception and memory formation. The narrative and story we tell children for why they go to school is to fill them with knowledge. This is only partially correct and only half the equation. The teacher's job is to form that knowledge into the perceived correct narrative of truth, to create a unified opinion about reality. Depending on the teacher or the content you consume while in a class, a completely different set of truth can arise from the same subject matter. Have you ever thought of something that changed your life? Have you switched your opinion on something that influenced you for the better or worse? Has a new perspective on an event had a positive impact on you? New ways of thinking change the world in many ways, such as inventing things or creating new systems for society. New thinking can also lead to paradigm shifts in society and lead to revolution. Be wary of truth, especially systems of mass truth that require conformance. For systems of control, the media, academia, big tech, the government, the narrative and unified opinions, and truth about the world is imperative to their survival and to a degree our own. When you buy into the narrative, you reap the rewards of society. When you don't, you are shunned and removed from the fruits of its labors. Any new government will attack the truth of the previous government. These new governments sow discontent of those who have knowledge because knowledge forms truth, and they try to override the mind in the other direction, pushing truth as knowledge. This is how society operates, for good or for bad. The art is the balance, which gives freedom or tyranny. Complete freedom of truth and narrative creates an uncontrollable society and a non-cohesive one. This society will be susceptible to control by strong narratives of control. Complete control over narrative and truth creates a controlled society and a cohesive one. This society will be susceptible to control by counter-thought and counter-narratives. Here we can see the Hermetic principles playing out in societal control. Everything has rhythm, everything is dual, and everything has a cause and effect. Truth is subjectively objective in that there is objective truth about reality, but most of it is simply our best understanding at this moment in time. Some things are objective regardless of opinion or narrative, while some things are always subjective. The rule of thumb when telling objective versus subjective is that objective truth is naturalistic and quantifiable, subjectivity is interpretations based on that information. Translating naturalistic observations form paradigms that reinforce themselves and permeate through society, creating more feedback loops. With knowledge of this and knowledge of human histories, one can map a lineage of these paradigms in philosophical thought and the progression of religion since recorded history. And because of this, truth changes the world. It is our duty as Novumists to understand this reality about knowledge and truth. Knowledge is more important than truth. When someone tells a lie, you smile. When someone tells a half-truth, you nod. When someone tells a truth, you laugh because you know it could be wrong in 10 years. Truth isn't a destination or termination point, knowledge is. Politics. Section Politics. In this section we will explore the political angle of Novum Carta and what we advocate how one should conduct themselves politically. The role of politics. He who controls others may be powerful, but he who has mastered himself is mightier still. Lao Tzu. Novum Carta has been said to be Hermeticism and Wicca for the right wing in the United States. This is most likely due to the abundant adherence to personal responsibility that is held as a center point. Yet, at the same time, we understand the need for universal suffrage, the need to provide, for the masses, good healthcare, basic income or supplementation, and a good safety net. We embrace radical centrism as our stated political leanings. The middle way is centered and adhered to even in politics. For every belief you hold on the left you must also acknowledge on the right, and vice versa. Like a philosopher, be able and capable of arguing for that position and the opposite regardless of side. In the coming age, there is no need for the covert right or the left. The slow march off the cliff must be stopped, and only those who create understand. The system of government we espouse and endorse is that of a skillsocracy. We believe the most competent generalists of society should lead, which we will discuss this more in depth in its own section. Radical center politics. One of the single greatest things the internet has given humanity is that it has lifted countless millions, if not a billion, from poverty levels to the middle to the upper class. The second thing it has done is create new sciences and allowed above-average IQ people to capitalize on those sciences to create new products in the world. Everything today requires the networking equipment and internet to operate. However, is this economic uplift worth the social and psychological damage it has done to humanity? None of it would survive a coronal mass ejection, CME, and humanity would be worse off than before the advent of it. The only people who would survive an event like that would be completely isolated agrarian societies. Once the point of failure collapses, destruction is in its wake. The internet has given us unlimited information. For every research paper, there are 100 articles written against it. For every negative article, there are a dozen positive, then negative against, ad infinitum. Objective truth is dead in an area of unlimited information. Humanity wasn't meant to hear the collective voices of a billion people looking for attention. The average individual is incapable of finding truth reliably when all it takes is an algorithm change in a search engine to create a new sense of reality. Different people who consume different news sources have different realities. Tribalism and objective truth cannot exist in society as it is currently constructed. This is where radical centrism and contrarianism come into play, if not needed for human survival at this point in our history. Bad ideas can easily come into focus and steer the nation, if not the world, into new and uncharted territories. Let's face facts, human psychology dictates that humans focus on negative facts and narratives over all others as a survival instinct. This is why there are new news channels that show 100% positive news coverage. No one cares. No one cares that someone crawled their way from poverty and became a functional member of society. In fact, statistically, people who find themselves in a rut are abandoned by family and friends alive for fear of bad luck. Contrarianism takes what is popular in society and turns it on its head. It doesn't even need to have an introspective moment. It doesn't need to objectivity. It merely defecates on anything that can be defecated on for the simple fact that it is popular. This was once called grunge, now it is called shitposting. Both are seemingly philosophically correct and desperately needed en masse. This is needed because no idea, regardless of how sound it appears, should go unchallenged. Modern society doesn't need single narratives that all espouse. This is what the government, media, and academia are trying to accomplish: multiple voices with one message. Radical centrism takes the notion of contrarianism and focuses it on political matters. If society seems to be drifting more left, a radical centrist moves right. If a bill moves the needle right, the centrist moves left. Rarely does anything ever fall squarely in the middle. A radical centrist is one who has principles to uphold, who doesn't take money from interest groups, who in fact hates government despite working for the man. A radical centrist takes the punk movement and applies it to politics. Move beyond left and right, red and blue, and embrace the grayness of nuance. This is the political stance of the Novum Carta. Skillsocracy. A skillsocracy is a form of government or organizing structure where the skill set of the position is the determining factor. In a skillsocracy, a person's worth is determined by the culmination of the skills that person can demonstrate and their mastery within those skills. The difference between a skillsocracy and a meritocracy is that in a meritocracy, a person is defined by their achievement rather than demonstratable or documentable skills. In a meritocracy, people can climb the political ladder through political favoritism, deals, and corruption, for which each climb is considered an achievement, enforcing a feedback loop. In a skillsocracy, you either possess the skills or you do not. Levels of competency and mastery come secondary. Supporting skills are weighed against one another, and the culmination can determine climbing the political ladder. One of the similarities, but also a departure, between a meritocracy and a skillsocracy is in testing. Just as one who is looking to fill a position at a company, in a skillsocracy each position requires a skill set. Just like in a job interview, one is given a series of tests. The results of that test will vary depending on the person. Other supporting skills will be weighed in the judgment of the position, just as with any job. As with any job interview, the hidden skill that must be assessed is: does this person possess the competency and drive to learn? The social hierarchy of a person should not come into the decision-making process. Where a person went to college should not come into the decision-making process. Were one to find mass groupings, for example, all people in similar positions all went to Yale, the people should find the process suspect. If the process is found competent, then academia needs to be examined, as no place of learning should hold a monopoly on a skill set. Under a skillsocracy, education should be given to all. It is simply paid for by a lifetime payroll tax of 6%. This meager progressive tax would bring in at the start over $1 trillion. 6% is $6 out of every $100 or $6,000 from someone making $100,000 a year. This $6,000 is approximately how much a year a student loan borrower pays back each year for an average bachelor's degree. The downside to a skillsocracy is that for some positions there could be elitism. You could see presidents of governments or senators out of reach of the regular citizen. This is why education should be paid for by the citizens through a general tax. Once you make education and skill attainment broadly accessible, it levels the playing field and forces higher standards enacted by the elite. These higher standards force people to strive more. This feedback loop forces society and industry to evolve at a faster pace. As the citizenry becomes more educated, different questions are asked, those problems are solved, and different solutions to existing problems are enacted. Progressives who see that all gender biology is equal are engaging as biases as previously discussed, but also have to contend with the biological fact that all people are made differently down to the level of gray matter in your brain. Some people have an aptitude for learning while others do not. Most of these loud voices come from places of elitism in academia, media, or gated communities, from thrones of altruism with no practical lived experience with the common man or woman. These insulated people toss objective reality out the window and use confirmation bias in statistics and political ideology as a worldview, as a means to show they are better than the plebs of society, because if they stepped from their gated communities and borders beyond and interacted with real people, they could see what is hardwired into the human animal. And that's what they want to change, the human animal. In many regards, they're just the same as their right-wing counterparts, just a shifted narrative. These people don't like a system such as a skillsocracy because things like race, nationality, gender, and other forms of favoritism are exposed and the natural state of the world is balanced. Aptitude, drive, perseverance, and natural God-given characteristics that is both learned by the individual and society are the valued attributes rather than those that can so easily divide and create victim out of people and groups. But the latter takes effort and resourcefulness from the individual. The amount of effort you put in is returned and victimization is no longer a badge of honor, a means of cutting lines. Hierarchy and structure. Section: Hierarchy and structure. In this section, we will discuss how members are ranked, what is required for them, and how communities of Novumists are organized. A Novumists Council. The Novumist Council is the name of the organizing body of messengers, guardians, seers, grandmasters, guild masters, and all the acolytes in all regions. It is the legal non-profit entity that everyone falls under, and under law, all finances can be viewed by the public. It is often abbreviated as NC. The mission statement of the NC is to teach the world through written and oral methods the ways of the old. This means not only religious information but skills that will matter later if and when our civilization collapses into anarchy and a dark age. This information encompasses but is not limited to gardening, permaculture, blacksmithing, butchering, hunting, masonry, baking and cooking, stone smithing, mead and winemaking, shoemaking, carpentry, plumbing, weaving, astronomy, chemistry, military, bookmaking, beekeeping. Messenger. A messenger is a top-tier member of the organization whose purpose is to develop the literature and direction of the Novumist Council. Messengers are like board members of a company but with marketing duties. The messenger rank is not something someone is voted into or where there is a preceding rank requirement. It is a position that can only be invited into. Messengers, like all ranks, abide by certain precepts that dictate the lifestyle they are to lead. They lead by example and practice what they preach. Some of the duties a messenger performs are the following. Develop the guidelines for guild members to follow, create the books and audiobooks, create general lesson plans. Guardian. A guardian is a member of the organization who is assigned to a messenger. Their duty is to essentially guard information and catalog information from seers, grandmasters, and associated guilds. Some of the duties assigned to a guardian is as follows. Document and catalog learning materials, document information from grandmasters and seers, backup data, perform accounting tasks. Guilds. Guilds are a local organizational structure that consists of like-minded people who have banded together to form a group to worship deity, and to serve as a means for accountability for practicing the way. The way is the 3 truths of living and the 6 paths of self-discipline. Members of the guilds are called acolytes. The ranks of the acolytes are apprentice, journeyman, and master. The guild master runs the guild and is usually appointed for life because he or she formed it. Grandmasters in the guild can run the guild however they choose so long as they follow the teachings outlined here. Guilds can be very unique as a result. Once the guild is registered with the Novumist Council, it can obtain special access to downloadable goods that will give them topics for study or conversation. It will give them access to grandmasters and seers who oversee a region of guilds. Grandmasters are knowledgeable people in the arts of the occult, mysticism, and the esoteric. They will help give guild masters the knowledge and support to run a successful group. Guilds can only contain up to 128 members, but the ideal is 32 active members at any given time. Once a guild reaches 64 members, a second guild master may be appointed from within the guild's ranks to help support the guild's initiatives. Grandmasters can only oversee up to 32 individual guilds. If there are more than 32 guilds, a new grandmaster will be chosen. The guilds will then be split between the 2 grandmasters. The structure of guilds. The structure of guilds is similar to that of any trade: apprentice, journeyman, master, and guild master. Each rank requires a new oath and a new set of responsibilities. Each rank has special rights, and these rights require special knowledge. Let's briefly cover those ranks now. Guild Master. A guild master is a possession that oversees the functioning of a guild. Guild masters can only achieve their ranking after completing the master rank and accepting the precepts and oaths suiting that rank. Guild masters report to grandmasters and seers of a given region. A guild master's position is a great one, requires in-depth knowledge of the teachings in this book, and it has many responsibilities. Some of their duties are the following. Give lesson plans to acolytes when they are ready, advance acolytes when they have proven themselves, make sure acolyte skill levels are balanced across guilds, deliver and promote news and media from seers, deliver and promote initiatives from grandmasters. Request fund distribution for acolytes and guild functions. master, journeyman, and apprentice. These ranks signify station within a guild, knowledge level, seniority, and responsibility. One begins as an apprentice, then as a journeyman, and ends as a master. There is no higher level than a master's rank. The master ranks have an additional 16 subranks called rights that are shared across guilds. For each rank, a member must show their level of mastery within a trade. They must have gained a solid understanding of the Novum Carta at each level. They must pledge loyalty to their brothers and sisters and accept the precepts of their position. Finally, they must guard the esoteric teachings of Hermeticism, Gnosticism, and Buddhism. Grand Master. A Grand Master is one who oversees the guilds within a region. Their position is one of both knowledge and management. They advise guild masters in the teachings of the Novum Carta but also advise them on events within guilds. They also approve, deny, or redirect funds to guilds for member benefits as outlined in the Shared Experiences section. They report to a specific messenger. Some of their duties are the following. Oversee the creation of new guilds, oversee the management of current guilds, create and oversee regional events for holidays and special occasions, disperse funds to guilds. Seer. A seer is a special position with a special duty. Not only are they the ones who see into the spiritual realm, but their duty is to see and analyze worldwide trends and predict future events. This position mimics seer and oracle positions of the past, in which these leaders knew much about the world but were advisors into the spiritual. Seers are assigned to Grand Master and are chosen by a messenger. They report to a specific messenger. Some other duties a seer may possess may be as follows. Act inefficient when one becomes a guild master, advise Grand Masters and messengers in world events, create videos and podcasts about world events, create videos and podcasts for spiritual guidance. Becoming a Novumist. The initiate. Anyone interested in following the Novum Carta should do so for the following reasons. 1. They are interested in the occult from a historical perspective. 2. They are interested in the ancient mysteries. 3. They understand the psychological significance and reasons of magic and ritual. 4. They may be interested in an ideology that espouses contrarian views on the world. 5. They find truth in what is outlined in this book. That said, we should also explore why you should not join and accept this ideology. You are looking for self-help or to better yourself. You are looking to fill a void in your soul. You are looking for absolute answers to the universe. You are looking for money or power. You are looking for political change. You are looking for personal titles or honorifics. For would-be members, let's begin an introduction. Novum Carta was created by Messenger Ryan after studying the occult mysteries for 2 decades. Messenger Ryan is not the great leader. In fact, the leadership hierarchy at the top is fairly flat. It consists of messengers and seers. You can think of hierarchy with messengers being board members and seers as being vice presidents. There is no CEO. There is no real power structure at the top except for guiding and supporting those below with knowledge and funds. When the Novum Carta was written, it was the culmination of combining and uniting multiple beliefs into a single entity and bringing together Hermeticism, Gnosticism, and Buddhism. Interwoven in those beliefs are the occult teachings, symbolism, and the belief that through magic and ritual we can influence the world and ourselves. The political stance of contrarianism and radical centrism in the Novum Carta is not a stance we must all adhere to, and thus is not mandated. It is used as a guide for the middle way. When you decide to join, you will need to join a guild. A guild is a group of people much like yourself. Although nothing is preventing you from doing so, new members can create their own guilds. This is not advised, however, and the reason for this is that we would prefer standardization in guild formation. People who join guilds do so for the experience and the knowledge. The title of Grand Master means nothing if you do not possess the knowledge necessary to answer questions that acolytes might have. This is true as well when being a Grand Master or Master. Joining is not about titles or control, it is about history, brotherhood/sisterhood, and a need for socialization under the banner of an ideology that brings meaning and purpose. If no guild exists, then reach out to the Novumist Council at novumcarta.com, and we will help guide you in the creation of your fellowship. If you are looking to fill a void in your soul lacking in purpose and meaning, or to find the answers of existence, we cannot help you find it. That is something only you can find yourself. In all likelihood, you may never find the answers for why you exist. That is part of the human condition, and in reality, we all think we have the answers, but really everyone is just as confused and lost as you. That aside, we can provide a framework of ritual that can provide a calmness of your mind that may benefit you now and in the future. Those that join realize the fragility of the future and look for companionship and support. In doing so, those members dedicate their free time to learning and having the skills available for such a future. Our minds are just as powerful as our fists, and members work on both. Oaths and precepts. A precept is a formal rule. In the context of the stated progression within a guild, the precept is a formal rule for how one should conduct their life. Unlike religious laws, precepts when broken have no eternal sin or damnation attached to them. However, they do come with personal shame. This shame should not come from others in the guild but solely through your own dishonor. Oaths are a guiding principle for you to follow and strive for. When becoming an initiate, the first oath you take is to the duty, as outlined previously. The following pages outline all ranks and precepts. Initiate and Journeyman precepts. Live in the moment, improve your environment, set good examples. Be faithful. Master precepts. Be worthy of trust, don't do anything illegal, harm no one, fulfill your obligations. Grand Master precepts. Maintain self-control, help all who need it, teach social norms, watch over the welfare of others. Seer precepts. Seek to live with truth, tolerate all points of view, keep secrets and confessions, be attentive to the environment. Guardian precepts. Safeguard your environment, be moderate in action and speech, honor yourself and others, care for your body and mind. Messenger precepts. Abstain from directly taking sentient life, abstain from taking objects not given to you, abstain from excessive sex or misusing sex, abstain from lying, abstain from hate or ill will towards man, abstain from using more than half of your income. Rituals, diet, prayers, and more. Basic burning bowl ritual. Warning: when doing this ritual, be aware you will be invoking something primal. When you peer into the darkness, something will peer back. Your prayer will need to be specific as to what you want. Leave nothing to chance. Be specific. Do not do this on or near carpet or anything combustible. Do not do this while the AC is on. Do not do this while a fan is blowing in the room. Do not evoke chaos gods. The basic prayer burning bowl ritual consists of a few elements. A ceramic bowl, candles, 3 to 4 incense, sage is typically used for cleansing, a lighter, a small piece of paper, around 4 inches long by 1 inch in height, something to write with. At night, set up the candles the way you'd like and light them. Put your prayer bowl near you will be sitting. Turn off the lights and sit and meditate for 5 minutes or so to transition your mind to the task at hand. When you are ready, take the piece of paper and write what you want your prayer. The prayer can be anything you need or want, for yourself or your friends or family, now or in the future. Be very specific, however, read the warning above. Invoke a god or not. One will find you. Do not evoke chaos gods. Write your prayer down. Fold it in half. Speak it out loud. Close your eyes and visualize the prayer working. After a few moments, open your eyes, and over the bowl light the piece of paper on fire and drop it in the bowl. Once the paper has burned the paper fully to ash, close your eyes and meditate for 5 more minutes. What to eat and what to drink. Warning: only perform a diet with the help and supervision of your doctor. Everyone's body is unique and reacts differently. Blood tests should be performed and monitored before and during changing your diet or fast. Limit alcohol. Alcohol should be limited to twice a week, to Friday and Saturday only where possible. A maximum of a 6-pack of beer or a bottle of wine should be consumed in a 7-day period. Max. Limit sugar or sugar substitutes. Sugary drinks like sodas or those containing fake sugar like drink mixes should be avoided. Long-term use of artificial sweeteners may change your gut bacteria, which could increase blood sugar levels over time. Fasting. Intermittent fasting, should be done with the guidance of your doctor. There are several different methods of it that can suit your lifestyle. A 1-day 24-hour fast should be completed once per month if your doctor deems it appropriate for your health and any conditions you may have. The reason for a fast is for the spirit, for a regenerative mechanism to occur in the body, and because food tastes wholesome after a fast. If you have diabetes, consult your doctor before performing any fast, as crashes or spikes could occur. Diet. Depending on your personality and underlying health conditions, you may want to consider the following diets where appropriate. You should do your research on the diets below and consult your doctor as to which one may be appropriate for you. This may require blood work to find the one that fits your body the best. Do research on the following: keto diet, Mediterranean diet, paleo diet, vegan. Supplementation. Vitamin supplementation should be considered using a gender-appropriate multivitamin at least twice a week. When you visit your doctor, ask for vitamin blood levels, and you can target specifics if you are lacking baselines in anything. Dieting may deplete or raise levels. Plastics, phthalates, and PFAS. In our modern world, almost all things are made from plastics, and you will find those derivatives in the most unlikely sources, like toothpaste, for example. These chemical byproducts are found in plastics, foods, containers, soaps, detergents, and water. These chemicals are to be avoided. Chemical found in effect. Phthalates, plastics, endocrine disruptor. Glycol ethers, cosmetics and perfumes, endocrine disruptor. Perfluorinated chemicals, water-resistant coatings, endocrine disruptor. Polybrominated diphenyl ethers, mattresses, endocrine disruptor. Polyfluoroalkyl substances, non-stick coatings, endocrine disruptor. Bisphenol A, food storage containers, endocrine disruptor. Atrazine, food endocrine disruptor. Organophosphate, food endocrine disruptor. PFAS, or polyfluoroalkyl substances, is one of the most widely used, forever chemicals that can be found almost everywhere. These can be found in more than half of the water supply in the USA and even drift on the wind, and thus can be found in rural areas. It is so prevalent it is found in your blood. There are over 160 forever chemicals, and they cannot be destroyed. You limit these chemicals by switching brands, using glassware for everything, downsizing, switching food sources, and filtering your water with staged systems. Affirmations and prayers. I am grateful for today and all its moments given to me. I forgive my misdeeds if any be had. I release today and all its misgivings. I choose peace and harmony and the strength and fortitude of tomorrow. For those listening, I ask for the serenity in what cannot change. With your will, I ask for the courage and wisdom to change what I can. I am not beholden to my fears. Life is a series of moments. In this moment I may fear, but in the next I am free. I ask for vision to see or sign, the wisdom to know what to do with it. If you are with me now, show me a sign. I love me in all my flaws. I see the world and all its suffering. I pray for love and kindness to end the pain. I pray for all to feel my affection. I pray that I find love in my flaws. I seek salvation in this kindness. For the ones will be done. Words of wisdom. Money is easy to give to people who are emotionally taxing because there is no effort behind it. You don't have to involve yourself, you just give an object in exchange for them to remain where they are. Conversations take effort. Conversations and talking with someone may be painful. Money is payment, so people can be emotionally distant. If you suddenly become lost, who will find you? Who do you want to be found by? If one is going to change their life for the better, how do we approach this task? Do you will change into existence through action? Or do we frame our existence for change and then will it? If you build a home on sand and if the wind blows and the house sinks, do not blame the wind. If you build a house on rock and the wind blows and the home falls, do not blame the rock. Sometimes the world does not make sense. Chaos and absurdity are real. You can try to prepare for everything or accept that control is an illusion. The search for meaning is inherently in conflict with the actual lack of meaning. The truth is that meaning is what you attach to that word, while at the same time there is no grand meaning. Meaning and purpose do not find you. You find it. There is not a cosmic ray that bursts from the heavens to bestow meaning on you. Meaning and purpose come from action, and through action will it be found. Through pain and discomfort can we find purpose if we choose to learn from it. Once you've fallen down the proverbial well, either financially or mentally, it is much easier to devise how you are going to escape the well when you've hit bottom rather than in free fall. Always step forward one foot over another without looking over your shoulder, for if you do, you will find invisible demons ready to haunt you. There is something out there that will always test us, our integrity, and our perseverance. Your struggles now shadow the joys you have experienced. It is pain we remember far too often. The good times we've had seem only reserved for conversations with others rather than during personal reflection. It's my contention that our brains are assholes. The scumbag brain. It is a sly bullshitter and self-proclaimed con artist. I am not my brain, but I am of it. My troubles are proportional to the effort that I spend thinking about them in worry. Misplacing my keys before work has been known to almost kill me. I'm sure my work doesn't miss me that much. Fear is a story we tell ourselves about something that may not happen. Choose the past and you never live for today. Choose the future and you will never reach it. Choose the present and you have the ability to change the world. Fear not the future but the lack of one. Do not fear the pain we endure now, but what comes when we cease to feel it evermore. Never fear experience but the lack thereof. It's a problem when someone plays video games all day. From morning to night. You're investing your time and money in something that isn't real. Like a dream, that data can disappear with a bad backup and power outage. Complexity means there is more room for failure and things to go wrong. There are limits to how complex something can be. Rules to live by. 25-5 rule. Write down 25 things. Pick the top 5. The things you circle are the priorities. Everything else is things you should never do. 80-20 rule. The 80 to 20 rule, also known as the Pareto principle, asserts that 80% of outcomes, or outputs, result from 20% of all causes, or inputs, for any given event. In business, a goal of the 80-20 rule is to identify inputs that are potentially the most productive and make them the priority. Another way to look at it is that 80% of all related issues come from 20% of people. 1% change rule. Change your life by altering yourself 1% every day to the person you want to be. Even with setbacks, you will be that change at the end of the year. PRE commitment. Motivation happens after you start, almost never before. The greatest amount of friction in change is at the beginning. Motivation doesn't work. Intention does. If you want something, if you need something done, write down what you want with the date and the time. Post it with tape on your bathroom mirror. 90 to 10 rule. Life is 10% of what happens to us and 90% of how we react to it. Apocrypha. In the land of the ancient New lived many souls where time flowed they had forgotten. The world passed them as they were addicted to shadows and were meat machines for the few. The masses fed upon one another in an endless cycle, the bottom, the middle, and the highest of all. For in the groupings of new there was a few of new for which only a few knew. They fed on all, top to bottom. The new few tamed them all with shadows. The masses even created the shadows subjugated everlasting. They did not know of these ways despite many speaking the truths of old. Those of new would not listen but instead endlessly consuming one another projecting shadows as if they were not. Pushed by the few of new the dawn broke and the new became as old. Summer to winter. Daylight to darkness. Happiness to sadness. As the cold set, strife and pain fueled consumption and the new was destroyed. As there was no longer new and those who lived fled to the mountains. They brought with them pestilence. On the mountains, the old new became the new new and they reached skyward in praise. Knowledge of old persisted here still. For if new had listened the graves would not be tree height. Had they headed their minds would have borne fruit of knowledge of bread and corn. They did not and could not for the trance of the false light was too great. The shadows dance. A temptress as old as time. Next time they will listen. Final thoughts from the author. I hope you have found something useful from this short book. I understand it covers a lot of topics in a very condensed way that may seem lacking at times. Many of these topics are long discussions in their own right, but I hope this format gives an idea as to what the Novum Carta is. I thought it prudent for outsiders to test the waters before they dove into the pond and why I added this author section as well. I created the philosophy of Novum Carta over the course of 20 years. I walk this path every day as this is how I live my life. My fascination with philosophy, anthropology, theology, cultures, mythology and esoteric knowledge as a hobby morphed into something more during the COVID-19 pandemic. I decided to embark on a quest and write my philosophy down and publish it. The path I walk may seem eccentric to many people and honestly, it's borderline asceticism in some regards, but it suits me rather well. I was born into a wealthy home, went to a decent college, and fell into a good profession. My life, however, lacked any sense of meaning, let alone purpose. I looked to all subtleties both minor and extreme in politics and lifestyles to fill a void in my soul. I've been a part of the New Atheist movement, the Skeptic movement, Occupy Wall Street, and others. Then one day, I called the electric company and had them shut off my electricity. There was something I wanted to test. I lived in my home with no electricity and I felt fuller than I had in a long time. My family urged me to turn it back on. I complied and conformed. I fell back on the tale of the Buddha that I had read about as a teenager, and recalled his journey into the aesthetic life that helped lead him to nirvana. So, as a 20-something, I began to sleep outside in my backyard under a tree every night when I came home from my job. I later ventured out of the backyard to wooded clearings around my home. I would sleep under the stars, wake up in the morning, walk home, take a shower, and go to a $60,000 a year career. When I got married, those days were over. When I had children, the simple life I dreamed of became complex. But the animal inside me was eager for a simpler life, and it gnawed at me. As these things go, others usher you away from what your soul desires. For me, freedom from the worldly system that modern humans created is what I desire. I have found my travels and time in the wilderness alone and in the urban jungle, that a snake is just a snake. It doesn't want to bite you, it just wants food and for you to leave it alone, but will strike if threatened. In the concrete jungle, a human is infinitely more complex, and their needs often juxtapose yours. The half-dozen times I encountered a snake in the wilderness that tried to harm me was zero, but I can count, with more than 2 hands, all the times a human tried to rob me, break into my home, mug me, or assault me in the street or in a car. It's this philosophy for why I haven't fallen into the trap of misanthropic thought. Having been born before the internet, and old enough to remember a world before it, I can't but feel as though something was robbed from me. Taken from me without permission. I don't see the world created today as progress. I see it as sickness. The Welsh call this emotion hiraeth, which loosely translates as homesick over a place that no longer exists or perhaps never was. Regardless, today I live a good existence, but I have an abundance of anti-materialistic and nonconformist views. I live a weird reality of both financially existing in the now but preparing for the human or environmental complexities of tomorrow. It's hard to maintain a marriage when one spouse wants to own a $500,000 home, while the other thinks living on the street could be adventurous and build virtue. I do not take comfort in modern society and appreciate very little of its convenience because, to me, it brings me further away from how humans should exist within nature. If I were to pick a period where both a balance between modern comforts and an equilibrium existed in nature, it would be between Western civilization 1600 to 1700. I would choose this with the modern medical gadgetry, the ability for mass production of food, and all the civil rights enacted at this time. However, this is pure fantasy in my lifetime, but maybe in the future, it won't be. In the meantime, I enjoy my existence with only enough things to enjoy moderate creature comforts. Simple living. I enjoy this life immensely, and it's not just for the things I own but for the people I encounter day in and day out. Over a beer or two, I tell them about my life's philosophy, and there is often a primal understanding of what I am trying to achieve, meaning in the chaos of modern life. This philosophy written here is that meaning for me, and maybe you will find it as well. Best of luck on your journey, friend. Find out more at www.novumcarta.com.